me rephrase my question. Are you ready for the meeting to start?
Yeah. Hi.
Thanks. Okay, thank you, everybody. I'd like to call this special meeting of the Board of Trustees to order. Could we please have the roll?
Testing. Roll call. Trustee Clark.
Present.
Trustee Collin.
Here.
Trustee Davis-Ford.
Here.
Trustee Levison.
Present.
Trustee Rosner.
Here.
Trustee Schnall.
Here.
President Torphy.
Here.
Also present. Barry Lewis, Village Administrator. Steve Rother, Village Council. Adam Lerner, Deputy Village Administrator, and Chanel Smith, Acting Village Clerk. Oh, that's part. Meeting notice, that you were going to give me an introduction to that too. Meeting notice. Adequate notice of this meeting had been provided to the press in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, NJSA 10:4-6. In addition, notice of this meeting was posted in Village Hall and on the village's website and has been filed in the office of the municipal clerk, of the village clerk. Official action may be taken.
Thank you. We have one resolution to start the meeting off. That's to go into executive session. Ms. Smith, can you please read it by title?
Sure. Resolution 2013-202, resolution authorizing an executive session at the September 9th, 2013 meeting of the Board of Trustees. President Torphy?
Yep. So we have a couple items. One is SOPAC lot redevelopment, which is a attorney-client privilege and a contract negotiation. Jersey Animal Coalition, attorney-client privilege and potential litigation. Village clerk separation agreement, attorney-client privilege, personnel and contract negotiations. PBA scheduling, attorney-client privilege and personnel and contract negotiations. The fire chief vacancy, personnel matter. Water tower repairs, attorney-client privilege, potential litigation and contract negotiations. And there was a request as well to add attorney-client privilege waiver, which is an attorney-client privilege matter. Is there anything else?
I move the resolution.
Okay. Moved by Trustee Collin. Second. Seconded by Trustee Levison. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. We'll be back out here at 8 o'clock. Okay, thank you everybody for being here. We're going to reconvene this open session of the Board of Trustees, and we're actually recessing our closed session meeting, and we'll be finishing up a couple items that we didn't get to just finish after our conference agenda meeting later tonight. Could we first please take the roll again?
Sure. Roll call. Trustee Clark?
Still here.
Trustee Collin?
Here.
Trustee Davis Ford?
Here.
Trustee Levison?
Present.
Trustee Rosner?
Here.
Trustee Schnall?
Here.
Village President Torpey?
Here.
Also present, Barry Lewis, Village Administrator, Steve Rother, Village Council, Adam Lerner, Deputy Village Administrator, and myself, Chanel Smith.
Thank you. Could everybody please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please stay standing for a moment of silence. Thank you. Okay, just a couple quick announcements before we get into things. Just a reminder that on Wednesday, to remember the lives of that were lost in the terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center on September 11, 2001, we'll be holding a brief memorial service and ceremony at the South Orange Firehouse, and that's Wednesday at 8:30 a.m. I just want to thank all of our local artists and the South Orange Performing Arts Center and everybody else that's been involved with the South Orange pianos. I don't know if folks have seen them around town, but it has been a huge, huge hit. Dozens of great videos on Facebook and Twitter of people of all different ages and piano styles and genres playing away, and so we're really, really happy kind of the musical spirit that has taken, brought out of our community. So again, a big thanks to SOPAC for helping organize that. And I think it's just, one more example of how they try to take music and their mission at the Performing Arts Center and take it outside of their physical walls and in our community. A reminder that Newcomers Day is September 22nd. Although I don't have the time, 1 o'clock at the South Orange Public Library. And all are welcome, especially if you are new to town. And you can learn a little bit more about all the great resources this community has to offer. And one last thanks to John Festa and everybody at the health department and everybody else who helped organize and came out to our health fair on Saturday. There was a great turnout down at the firehouse, people getting blood pressure checked and cholesterol screened, and all sorts of other great things, and a lot of great organizations from the Rescue Squad to St. Barnabas to the iMobile. A lot of folks came out to help, and it looks like every year that we've been doing that, turnout is going up. So I just wanted to thank folks involved with that again. Before we get to any action tonight, I do want to open it up to a public comment period, which we always do before we take any action. So if we could grab the sign-in sheet from the back, that would be great. And the one thing that I want to do just before we get into that, how many folks are here tonight about parking in Tuxedo Park? Great. And this in no way is meant to deter anybody who does want to say something during public comments, but I would love to give a couple-minute recap of some of the things that have happened just to make sure everybody has information. And if that if that mitigates some of the concerns or questions you had, that's great. I think we apologize for the fact that you even have to come out to the meeting to learn about this. So as many folks know and have noticed, and that we've been aware of for about a week, Seton Hall has been directing students that have parking permits for on-campus parking to the Tuxedo Park neighborhood for parking. Our police department and parking authority has been out, and they've been ticketing students that are in crosswalks and intersections beyond the hourly limit this entire time. We did have a couple conversations with Seton Hall. It seems as though they had an unexpectedly large increase in the number of students who needed parking permits and didn't really have the facilities to provide for all of them. In a longer term sense, Seton Hall is aware of this problem and this shortcoming of their own campus because they have been applying to our zoning board for variances to build an expansion onto their parking deck, which was actually approved unanimously, I believe, this past Tuesday night in our zoning board meeting. That in no way is a short or medium-term solution. That's 12, 18 months, probably 2 years before that's actually built and starts to help alleviate these problems. So obviously we need to figure out something to do in the short term. We were under the impression after some conversations with folks at Seton Hall last week on Thursday that there would no longer be any of a couple different things that we noticed were major problems. One was that the gate on South Center Street was open and they were directing traffic through that. And the other was that security personnel were in public streets directing traffic. Those were in the two kind of major, and that Seton Hall kind of had formally started directing people to this neighborhood as the, where you go to park. So those were kind of our concerns. We had discussed them with them. Friday is always a light day. There are very few classes. We were not 100% sure whether the gate was closed that day and everything was fine because there were less students on campus, or whether they had heeded our request to close the gate and not direct students towards that neighborhood anymore for parking. We followed up with some discussions on Friday about that, discussed some of the kind of more medium-term solutions, which include having some employees and contractors that are doing work on campus actually shuttled in from elsewhere. For example, they're taking some space in the Maplewood Pool parking lot, and they're going to start having people that are there all day park there and then shuttle them over to campus. We've also discussed about basically helping them get online so they can use some of their space on campus, some of the fields, to park the overflow until enough students kind of drop out over the course of the semester. The need always goes down a little bit throughout the semester. It's obviously the highest right now. And Tuesdays and Thursdays being the highest peak days. So this morning we checked again. Things seemed okay. By the late morning, the gate was open again, and there were security personnel from Seton Hall directing traffic. To their defense in this case, the idea, I think, of having from the conversations that we had, of having their security people out there was actually to try and help make sure that it was somehow done orderly and people weren't blocking driveways and fire hydrants and things like that. I'm not sure it had the intended effect that they were going for, but that aside, we did speak with the public safety director at Seton Hall and the dean of students. Mr. Lewis and myself went up to Seton Hall after that. As soon as we heard that the gate was open again, our police chief and myself did go to South Center Street, and we did close the gate and asked that they remove all the security personnel from Tuxedo Park, which they did do both of those things as soon as we asked them to today. And we then followed it up with some conversations with the administration at Seton Hall about what can we do to help them, even though it's their overflow students. It is negatively affecting our residents, and it's also a problem, and we're good neighbors, so why not try and help however we can? So what we realized and what we decided with them today, just a couple hours ago, which is why we haven't really had the chance to put it out to folks in the community yet, is a couple different things. One is that along South Orange Ave, traveling eastbound, so on the south side of the street, basically if you're heading up towards Newark, there's student permit parking that's allowed there right now. We have allowed Seton Hall to do, pending any objection from Essex County, which we haven't heard as of yet, that we're going to extend the number of cars that can park there a little bit further down the street. So the street is the same width. We went out there, checked everything out, ran everything by our police department. No safety concerns with doing that. The lane is already taken out of traffic because there's already cars there. So it's another couple hundred feet of parking that we're able to gain, maybe 15 or 20 spaces. We also spoke with our police department and made sure there were no safety concerns with allowing temporarily, just as that will be temporary just up until Friday of this week, the temporary parking of cars on Ward Place on the side of the street, on the east side of the street, if you're traveling northbound on Ward, where there's actually a shoulder and painted lines like when it was paved, it was almost looked like it was meant for parking. So there won't be any cars directly in front of any houses. Those are all on the side of the street where the Seton Hall campus is already. So between those two solutions, and also we're working to see if we can get them some access to New Waterlands Park, There's a parking lot that we plan to use in about a year when we have to relocate commuter parking from 3rd and Valley, that we plan to relocate some folks to that area, which is really not used at all during the daytime and really only used in the afternoon and evenings for recreation activities that happen there. So we're also working with them on that. So we've been trying to find ways to help them with this, understanding that their problems are our problems and everybody's problems is everybody's problems, but that at the end of the day, what has been going on in Tuxedo Park with the parking has been completely unacceptable from our standpoint, and that we've been in conversations with them to try and resolve this as soon as possible. So after today happened again, which I think we were all a little bit surprised about, we did end up having a couple more meetings that resulted in those alternatives being looked at. Seton Hall did, in kind of exchange for us being gracious with our own public facilities to try and get some of the cars in places that wouldn't be as big of a roadblock as in a residential neighborhood like Tuxedo Park, that they did notify all of their students today, asking them to discontinue using Tuxedo Park for parking. Part of the concern was that they've been directing people there already, that some of the damage may have been done, and even if they no longer have any security personnel out on the street, people may just now, they know that they can go there. Although there were quite a few summonses that have been issued to people that have parked over the limit. So anyway, so they did notice all of the students today that those options are becoming available to them. They're starting to be available tomorrow morning. We tried to move as quickly as possible to make some other spots available and to, again, ask students not to use Tuxedo Park for parking. So that is explicitly put in the message that went out to students today after the conversations that we had. So there's a long-term solution that is going to take a very long time. There are some medium-term solutions that will take about a week or two, which includes them getting enough people off campus to use a shuttle, parking in parking lots that they've identified that they can use, and also using their own lawn, but they have to prepare it by putting down gravel and some other things to make sure that it just doesn't become a pit of mud, and it's supposed to rain this week. So those are the medium-term kind of solutions. In the short term, the gate will not be open at all again, and we have confirmed the police department is ready with barricades. If the gate goes up again, police barricades are going up on the street, and that's the end of that. And we don't expect that to happen. We had a pretty constructive meeting, I think, with Seton Hall today about it, but we did communicate how strongly and how significant and important this is, that this not continue and that it shouldn't have really happened in the first place, as none of us in the village were notified that Seton Hall was planning on doing this. Since that point, we have been trying to work with them and find some of these solutions. So again, in the short term, the gate will not be open tomorrow or any other day for any parking or for anything else. There will be no Seton Hall public safety or security people in Tuxedo Park doing anything having to do with parking or finding parking or traffic or anything of that nature. And so those should fix the problems that we've had. There will likely be a handful of students who ignore the alternatives, ignore the new messages and all that kind of stuff, and still make their way up to Tuxedo Park. If that happens, would imagine, there's no way to know how many it is. We'll be up there tomorrow monitoring it, but imagine that there will be a handful of students who do that, but it will be nothing like what happened last week and nothing like what happened today. So those are the steps that we've gone through. This has all happened since Thursday. So we've been moving, pretty quick to try and make sure we find a way to not only solve the problem for our residents, for all you guys that are here, but also try and not just say, hey, tough luck, figure it out on your own. We want to try and be helpful and supportive of Seton Hall and do appreciate and don't want to punish the students for, being told where to go park. So again, hopefully we're optimistic that this is going to solve a lot of the problems that have been raised. I know everybody on the board has spoken to many different residents about it, and I think all of us appreciate all of you guys letting us know what's happening, because it's not always easy for us to know what's happening at what time, and you guys have all been keeping us updated. So all that hopefully provides some sort of summary about what's been happening. Again, if you're signed up, I'll read through all the names. If you'd like to still come and speak, please feel free to, but hopefully this helps, again, provide a little bit more information. And again, we wish we didn't have to do this and that you didn't have to come out to the meeting. And if you are interested in getting an update about this, if you do want to leave your email address, maybe with Mr. Lerner back there, if you can take those down before you leave, sitting over there, we can make sure to let you know if there is anything more that happens about this. So, with that being said, thank you for all listening. Wilma Vanderpaul. And just remember, when you come up to the microphone, please just state your name and your address, and so that everybody gets a chance to speak. We have a 3-minute timer back there.
My name is Wilma Vanderpool. I live on 21 South Center Street, which is in Tuxedo Park. I came out here tonight, first of all, in support of all my neighbors who have been impacted negatively over the week and a half that we've been dealing with these situations. Also to say thank you to all of you on the board and the village administration and the police for picking up this issue for us, because for all of us this was unexpected, and I wanted to be on record, quite frankly, that as a Tuxedo Park neighborhood we have been asking for dialogue about initiatives that has been impacting us with Seton Hall for, I want to say, 35 years, if I speak with all the residents. And so far, the only response we have had to those requests have been situations like this. So I do want that noted, that every time they need to get something done, they become the bully first and expect everybody to roll over happy. Again, I really appreciate the solutions that you have all helped come up with. But I want to stress again, we are no strangers to anybody, not in the town or Seton Hall. Move-in day was a big issue. All the ordinances were disregarded. Nobody in Tuxedo Park was upfront informed. So it became a real big issue that, again, we had to rally as a neighborhood to get any form of solution or any form of enforcement done. And that just doesn't help. That's actually why we are known for a neighborhood that always rallies, because we just have to. That's what we've been trained to. I really, again, we appreciate the efforts, but we are wary, and we will definitely keep calling, and that's all I need to do. I did it in under the 2 minutes. It's a record for me. Thank you again, and have a good night. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you. Jeff Greenwald.
Jeff Grunwald. I live at 715 Varsity Road in Tuxedo Park. I'm a 34-year resident of Varsity Road, and that gives me 34 years of experience with Seton Hall and the community at large. And so I have to say that I'm appalled by their behavior in this instance, but I'm not the least bit surprised, because in fact this is the pattern, as Wilma identified, that Seton Hall consistently violates ordinances, does things without regard to the community at large, doesn't necessarily inform the community. There are many instances of this, this just being the latest. What's troubling about this one is that there was no regard for safety on their part, no regard for the quality of our life in the neighborhood and how it was degraded and disturbed. No recognition that we're a viable neighborhood that contribute to the quality of life in South Orange and have been doing so for many years. The Neighborhood Association in South Orange began about 38 years ago over two prominent issues, one of which was real estate steering, which has long since been abated, but the other one has been quality of life issues with Seton Hall. And something that Wilma said before is something that's been consistent for 35, 38 years, and that's a consistent lack of dialogue between the neighborhood, between the community, and between Seton Hall. And frankly, we bring a lot to the community. Seton Hall doesn't bring a whole lot to the community as far as working to better the community and make it a better place to live. So I'm pleased that you think that there's going to be a resolution to the parking issue. I hope you're right. I hope that these solutions, the temporary ones and the more permanent ones will in fact work. I have some doubts based on 34 years of experience with the university, but I'm willing to look forward to some changes. But I also want to recommend at some point that we revisit posting some new parking hours and new ordinances about parking in the Tuxedo Park neighborhood so that we don't have to go through this again in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. John Perkert.
John Perkett, 661 Longview. I wanted to come because I wanted to express my dismay at what I witnessed at the last BOT meeting with respect to how Ms. Robin Klein was handled. I don't think I've ever felt more embarrassed or disappointed in a board action as I was that night. I don't know how that meeting came to be called. It was called earlier than most people could attend, at a time when most people were away on vacation. I want to thank Ms. Cullum and Mr. Schnall for trying to do the right thing at that meeting, and I want to express my dismay with the rest of you for how you treated a very valuable employee and which is now a loss to our town. The second issue I wanted to bring before the board was my concern about the Village Hall renovation. I have never seen or heard a resolution put on the table to actually move forward with that project, and yet we are looking at spending something, at least, rough calculation, about $7 million. It's never been put before the electorate with an expenditure of that magnitude. I would think something like that should be at least a resolution where there's some accountability as to who's voting for it or against it. I don't know what the final tab will be, and neither do you. Is this an open checkbook? If it goes up to $15 million, we'll be on the hook for that. This is a SOPAC all over again, and I'm very concerned at the lack of due process and the lack of respect for the residents of this town in terms of their pocketbook. This has all the makings of another fiasco, in my opinion. And any of us who have ever done a home renovation, and I have, know that those initial estimates are very far from the actual. So I just want to put that out there, and I think this board needs to have a resolution on spending that amount, whatever that amount is, to do this project. The third thing I wanted to talk about was a resolution that I saw on the agenda for yet another IT project which is falling below that magic threshold requiring an RFP. I don't know how many of these things we've had, but it's yet another $15,000 project for another IT software package that we may or may not need. I've never heard it discussed in public forum. This is like all the other things that have been nibbled away, where we now start adding up this $15,000 project, the one before it, and the one before it, and suddenly we're starting to talk about real money, and it's all coming in under this magic threshold. So therefore, there's no accountability. I think that process needs to be re-examined, and we need to think about what is this doing to the residents of our town. We have a lot of senior citizens in this town who are finding it very hard to keep up with this tax burden. And I think it's about time that we start putting them front and center as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Rashima Gordon. Okay, thank you. John. Okay, sorry. As someone with bad handwriting, you'd think I'd be better at reading someone else's. But.
John Tiefert. I'm from 104 South Kingman Road in Tuxedo Park. And first of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I'm also here regarding the Tuxedo Park parking issue, but to me it speaks to a much larger issue, which is the neighborhood and the village's relationship with Seton Hall. As many of you are aware, we had quite a large conversation a couple years ago about residential versus commercial use variance that the school requested for 1 South Center Street. The board unanimously declined that variance. There's an ongoing conversation that we're having about the 250,000 square foot campus center that the school is requesting several variances for. We truly hope that you keep this parking situation in mind and realize that the building code maintains the scale of the village. It's very important. And the parking variance for this, the parking deck that recently got approved unanimously, personally I feel it got approved unanimously because, at least for me, I just don't have enough time to keep on top of all of the little variances that Seton Hall is applying for all over the place. All of these construction projects seem to come from 18 different directions, and rather than answer questions that the village, that our neighborhood has in a straightforward manner, they show us a little bit here and a little bit there. And meanwhile, as an organization, they certainly have a master plan and they know what they want to do. So getting these things by little by little by little turns the campus into a monster that the rest of the village really can't support. It's just too small to support an enormous, enormous $250,000, gigantic, I don't even know. So to your opening statements, and I truly do appreciate the hard work that you've done working with the police and trying to work with South Orange and asking the students not to park in the neighborhood. I'm shocked that the school had an unexpected number of parking permits. When I was at UMass, they issued 5,000 permits. That was the number. And when they sold out of permits, they're done. And if you wanted a parking permit the next year, you had a lottery. And if you didn't get one, tough. Seton Hall knew how many permits they were giving out. They had no consideration to where these cars were going. And with the amount of construction they have on campus, they know how much room they have. So to ask students not to park in the neighborhood, the police have asked students to not leave trash in the neighborhood, not have parties at 3 o'clock in the morning, not argue and scream, and these rental properties are really becoming a nuisance. And to that, it speaks to just disrespect of Tuxedo Park and the village itself. And I'm out of time. I used all my time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Jason Grant?
Yes. Good evening. And thank you for the forum. A couple of things, and I'm a longtime resident of 144 Mercer Place in Tuxedo Park, 28 plus years, and has been said from some of my neighbors already. This problem has been going on for a long, long time. It is deliberate. We talked about overbooking the parking. The kids told us they're getting $300 a pass. Effectively, what that means is they're selling public property and putting them on public, taking in the money and putting the kids on public property. I don't know how in the world that's acceptable. The estimates I've heard of how much they've over-enrolled range from 300 to 1,000. I have no way currently of, ratifying that number. However, whatever the number is, we're talking about a significant amount of money. They've got the bucks from the oversale of these parking permits to shuttle from some other place, whatever that may be. The fact that they would bring college employees over to direct traffic is just a slap in the face. There's no other way to talk about it. It's one thing if you send out a memo, but to have people in the neighborhood directing traffic. We have kids who play in the street where our streets have been reduced to one-way streets in the cases of Milton, Mercer, and Cameron. It just is not going to fly. What I would ask and urgently ask you to do is to put through an emergency ordinance resolution or whatever it takes to get the signs up. I see no reason why that could not happen within a matter of days rather than weeks or months. And I thank you for your attention, and we look forward to your further actions.
Thank you. Diane Grant?
My name is Diane Grant. I'm 28.
You have to speak directly into that.
I'm also a 28-year resident of Tuxedo Park, Mercer Place, and very proud to be in that neighborhood. I came home the other day on September the 4th because I'm also a team leader and a teacher at South Orange Middle School. I opened up my home the first days of school for my team to have a team retreat so we can plan for what we need to do for the school year. When I came home, just to make sure that my house was in order for lunch, I was dismayed to see that my teachers that were coming had no parking spaces. Every space on our block was taken, including inches of my driveway that was actually interfered so I wasn't able to get into my driveway easily. Luckily, my neighbors came to my rescue and offered their driveways as a solution, but to come home and not know that this was happening, I could not understand. When I drove in, the Seton Hall patrol told me that the policeman, the police department of South Orange Township, gave them permission to park in our streets. When I did call Town Hall, I was told that the permission wasn't given to Seton Hall. So my question tonight is, who gave the permission for them to do this? And if you did not give them permission, then they have lied. So I don't understand how this can just go without any kind of just cause with Seton Hall for them to deliberately open their gates, flood the cars into our neighborhood. There were actually security guards in my driveway directing the students to turn around because they were in the wrong direction and they didn't want them to get a ticket. I also heard one security guard saying there were 2 openings on Mercer Place. I just could not believe that my neighborhood was turned into a parking lot. And of course it isn't the students' fault, but it's also the burden shouldn't be put into our neighborhood. So I'm asking today, just like my husband, for some emergency action to take place to make sure that our streets are not open to this harassment. I mean, I really feel like I'm being harassed basically by Seton Hall. The caliber of our neighborhood has gone down. The quiet streets, they aren't quiet anymore. I picked up trash on my lawn that was dropped by Seton Hall students when they either entered or got out of their cars. So I'm just asking you, as elected officials for our town, to please take action on this immediately. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Lisa Good.
Hi, my name is Lisa Goad. I live
Thank
at
you.
136 Mercer Place. I moved to New Jersey 4 years ago from Connecticut. I know. Fell in love with Tuxedo Park. My husband and I bought a quaint little house there. You can hear a pin drop on the streets at night until a few weeks ago. We've got a huge problem on Mercer Place, as everyone in Tuxedo Park does. Mercer Place currently does not have any parking restrictions. And the security guards that were in my neighborhood and my driveway, which is on video, hopefully you've all seen the video that Ben Niles was kind enough to shoot for us, my driveway was used as a turnaround. That's unacceptable. The security guard literally told someone to pull in my driveway and turn around. I would imagine that he wouldn't be too happy if someone did that in his yard. Not acceptable. We need restricted parking on Mercer Place. We're asking you to please help us and do something to get this put on Mercer Place. The other neighborhoods closer to Seton Hall do have restricted parking. While we'd rather not see them park there, word is out. They know where they can park now. They know they can park on Mercer, Milton, and parts of Cameron that there is no restriction on. Please help us. Please do something to bring quiet of our neighborhood back. People are on Facebook pulling their kids in off the streets because they can't ride their bikes. There's nowhere safe to ride their bikes. The buses can't get down. It's just not acceptable. We need your help. We need your help to do something about Mercer, Milton, and Cameron. So please help us.
Thank you. Mark.
So it's Mark Graham. I live at 124 Milton Place. I am newer to Tuxedo Park. I've been there just 4 years. I live there with my wife and we have 2 kids, a 4 and a 5-year-old. I reiterate a lot of what has been said already. Our issue raises really from the safety concerns for our kids on our street. There's no parking restrictions on Milton Place either. I appreciate the work that you have done and the effort that you put in to discuss with the university to make changes. I do find it a little disconcerting that, as John pointed out, they probably were very well aware of the number of permits that were being issued and the number of students and the lack of parking that was available on the university. I find it disappointing and inconsiderate on their part that they would open a gate and just direct traffic with their staff into a neighbourhood. I find it disappointing that you as trustees will go and reach out to them, but they made no effort to reach out to the town before this occurred. And I find it disheartening that you had a resolution last Thursday, or so you thought, that was put into place. Friday looked good, but we face the same conditions again today. Today was the first day that the kids went back to school, which made it harder, I believe, for some of my neighbours in the afternoon when buses were dropping off, trying to find to the bus stops. So I find to sum up as a whole, I really hope what you put in place works. Like my neighbours, I asked at a Milton Place that we could get parking restrictions for an hour or 2 hours, so that it remains a safe neighbourhood that it was when we moved in with the kids. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sam Niels. Got it, thank you. Just going to start calling by address, I think.
Hi, my name is Sam Niels. I live at 105 South Kingman Road. If you ever want to find me, it's the house with the stone wall around the yard. It happens to be the center of Tuxedo Park. Just real point and simple. What I witnessed last Monday, like nothing I've seen since I've been in this town since 1978. I was appalled. Man, the chief of police stood out there and watched this happen. And never in my years here have I seen anything like this. To allow this, that's bully tactics. That's what they did, was bully. They thought they were going to get away with it. They thought we weren't going to sit back and not say anything and allow them to continue to do it. Town trustees, you need to know that Tuxedo Park got your back if you do what you need to do. If you tell them no, and you let us know that no, we'll back you up. But we're not going to allow our town, our community to be destroyed. We was out there having a block party on Saturday, and it was great to see the streets open with no cars, blocked off. But I have to give it to our police department. They've been on duty. They have been there to make sure that no one's parking garage or parking lot or driveway was violated because there were not cars in the way. We thank them for that, but we know that Seton Hall would love to have the whole community, which they're not going to get unless they're going to pay real big money for it. And we need to let them know that, number one, our town is all backing up the Tuxedo Park, the whole community, because it has been a place of beauty for my 3 kids to grow up in this town, to have my yard as the center for all the kids around on all those streets that you've heard mentioned today, play in my yard. Because that was the center, and we had the only tree that had steps on it. And we were excited about that. That was a joy in this community, and it can continue to be a joy if we allow them not to bully us and think they're going to get away with that. I got 2 available parking spaces off the street that students have used and paid for on my driveway on Cameron Road that's off the street. I'm going to put up a sign, 2 spaces for rent, compact cars. Beyond that, you're illegal. They're off the street. And we have had that situation before, and the kids that were renting had no problem with that. But we have to let them know that we're not going to stand for that. Because it actually, the pride of Tuxedo Park is that you drive in there, and if you're not sure where you are, you think you're in a gated community. And when you look at the sign off of Tuxedo Park, off of South Orange Avenue, that adds value to every home in that community, to people will ride through just to watch.
Thank you.
You need to know that. Thank you.
Thank you. JB Kent. And this is my fault. We haven't been just reminding people with 30 seconds left, so just going to do that from now going forward.
Good evening. My name is Joanne Kent. I live at 138 Milton Place. I've lived there since 1982. And I want to reiterate what one of my other neighbors said, was that we've been having problems with Seton Hall for the last 30 years. This is not something new. So this is a new problem. And I'm very thankful for what you have done. And what I would like to see is we need to have some emergency ordinances. So some time restrictions in our neighborhood, on Milton, Mercer, Reynolds, and parts of Cameron. And like the other gentleman said, Seton Hall knows how many people they admitted, and they know how many had cars. Just like where he went to college, where I went to college. They had a certain number of permits. When they were used up, that was it. Everybody couldn't just come and have a car. And I think it's just truly inconsiderate of Seton Hall, and they've done this over and over and over again. And I'm glad that you're taking some time, and I think the interaction with them is wonderful, but they need to know that they cannot get away with this.
Thank you. Peter, 665 Cameron Road. Okay. Jen, 663 Cameron Road. She just left. Okay. David Isola.
Good evening. David Isola, 122 Milton Place. I moved to Milton Place 2 years ago. My wife is a stay-at-home mom. We have a 1-month-old and a 1.5-year-old. Today she told me that she saw the bus drive up and was unable to pull to the curb to let the kids out, so they let the kids out in the middle of the street. I don't know that that's very acceptable in my opinion. I understand that you're speaking for Tuxedo Park and the efforts that you've told us about your long-term, medium-term, and short-term plan, but I think you might need to sharpen your pencil a little bit because, you know, you can't unring a bell. Those students know they can park there, and if it were me, if I had a choice between being shuttled from Maplewood Pool or parking in Tuxedo Park, I'd probably take Tuxedo Park if I knew I could park there. So I think you need to be a little more strict. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Chandros.
My name is Robert Chandros. I live at 108 West Montrose Avenue, where I've resided for 42 years. Until 11 days ago, I generally felt proud and good about living in South Orange. After that horrendous meeting on the 29th of August, I am sick about living here. I think the behavior of this Board of Trustees on that evening was scandalous, illegal, and just inappropriate. I watched you as several of you sat behind that table with pompous, arrogant expressions on your face, not willing to give a valuable employee any opportunity to defend herself. I saw one of you think he was a joke by using the words yay and nay when he was asked to vote, words that have not been used in this country since colonial times. You treated Robin Klein with such disdain and such dismay that I only hope what you get to replace her is the worst possible individual. Since that meeting, there were 4 versions of tonight's agenda. One resolution has conveniently disappeared. On the 29th, the agenda never showed up until 4 p.m. in the afternoon for a meeting that you all knew very well would not attract much attendance because people were still coming home from work. A lot of people do have full-time jobs, or they were away for a last summer weekend. Instead, you rammed this down their throats. You never gave Ms. Klein the opportunity to present her story. She asked for it. You set things up so that she couldn't meet your 48-hour requirement because you didn't announce this meeting until less than 48 hours before it was held. I only hope to heaven that the state and county prosecutor's office get into the act and hold all of your feet to the fire. It's time this pompous, arrogant, inhumane, unintelligent behavior stopped. You took a person who has 2 college degrees, who has a lot of experience as a municipal clerk, who knows things backwards and forwards, and you got rid of her. And what do we have tonight? 4 versions of an agenda that were revised every hour today. Items not even on the agenda, such as a place for public comment. This is the way you want to treat the people who live in this town. You all, those of you who stood for this, ought to be ashamed of yourselves. You ought to look in the mirror and look at it with total, complete disgust and maybe do something to right the wrong that you created. I am just sick and tired of watching this board ram things down the throats of the residents. I noticed that Trustee Rosner managed to show up on time tonight, but on the 29th, he couldn't get here by 6 o'clock, a time that I'm sure was as inconvenient for him as it was for a lot of residents of this community. So I'm telling you for the last time, you better stop doing this stuff. Otherwise, people are going to start showing up in Village Hall asking for petitions for the next election, and they're going to start raising money for it. And believe me, there's a lot of people with a lot of money who will raise a lot of it if you don't change.
Thank you. Rob Sandow?
That's a hard act to follow. I'm here tonight to talk about parking in Tuxedo Park. Personally, I am just appalled at the blatant disregard for the safety of the residents that Seton Hall has shown. They open the back gate, they bring people out, they tell people to park on both sides of the street. The streets up there are too narrow to have cars parked on both sides of the street. That should never have been the case. What we need at minimum is no parking on one side of each of those streets, because of an emergency vehicle. I've been on the jitney when there's parking on both sides of the street. The jitney can't get down there. And imagine a fire truck, God forbid, a fire truck needs to get down there and it can't because there's cars parked on both sides of the street, or an ambulance or something like that. That needs to be dealt with right away, that there should be parking only on one side of each street. And if we don't want cars parked there all day, which we probably don't, you know, South Center Street has no parking on either side because of the same situation for the last 30 years. South Kingman and South Kingman has parking, I believe, on one side of the street, as does Varsity and Cameron, and most of Cameron. I think that the rest of the streets should probably have the same and restricted time on the rest of it. Seton Hall University, unfortunately, does not really pay much attention to the well-being of the people who live in our neighborhood. This body right here, 4 years ago, made it legal to put de facto fraternity houses in our neighborhood. In 2008, that was not legal. In 2009, you redefined the definition of household unit to allow 13 or more students to live in a 5-bedroom house. I don't understand why that was done, but it just shows that now we have fraternity houses in our neighborhood, and it just shows that our neighborhood has been disregarded for some time, and we'd like it to stop. With my last 30 seconds, I just want to say a couple of words in support of Robin Klein. As a candidate for the Board of Trustees, I had numerous interactions with Robin. I felt she was the consummate professional, the face of the village, to anybody who walks in the door there, and I'm very, very sorry for what happened to her. Thank you.
Thank you. Raymond Scott.
Thank you. My name is Raymond Scott. I live at 25 South Stanley Road, and I've been here since 1983, celebrating my 30th year. And as you can see from all of my neighbors, my wonderful neighbors here, this situation with Seton Hall just keeps going on and on. And it's really like there's a lot of disrespect. I would much rather see some method of where there could be some dialogue between Seton Hall and Tuxedo Park, the residents of Tuxedo Park. I mean, because basically there's no use of them putting us through this when they know they want to do these things. They don't ever tell us about it or don't give us any input so that we can help solve some of the problems. So I think that, you know, like what I think I would like to see the trustees do is to set up some kind of ordinance where they stop this action right now, and there's some heavy fines at the end of it. So, I mean, because people get to understand that they can't just continue to run over the entire community when they have to pay out some money. So basically, if there's any way that you wonderful folks here. The trustees can get together and do this and bring this thing together and show them some muscle, in fact, of how they need to treat your neighbors, your constituents. I think that would be greatly appreciated. And I'm sure my neighbors who are, like I say, are doing wonderful jobs and got wonderful families would appreciate it very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Madra Francis.
Hi, I'm Moja Francis, 668 Varsity Road. I'm here tonight because, like all my neighbors, I think we're just very frustrated about the situation. I have 2 young boys who were not able to enjoy the last week of summer, ride their bikes, scooters, or play in neighbors' yards because, quite frankly, there were too many cars. They were moving. They were moving too quickly at certain times. They were blocking driveways, and it was just clearly unsafe for my kids to enjoy the last week of summer. Unacceptable. Secondly, I feel that, we've mentioned that you've had discussions with Seton Hall, and moving forward, things are going to be different. But I think, again, Pandora's box is already open. As the neighbor mentioned, now the students know that there's someplace else for them to park. And given the choice, I strongly believe most college students who are running down to the wire with 5-10 minutes before class, they're not going to go to the Maplewood Pool or whatever far away location that exists. They're going to turn into Tuxedo Park, and I think, I'm very concerned that it's going to be seen as a parking lot for the students. On Milton, on Mercer, I really strongly think that we should consider putting in parking limitations. I think, now that this information is out there and they were directed by their, college personnel to park there, it's going to continue to be a problem. I hope that the dialogue that happened today will move to some sort of resolution. I think it's very unfair of Seton Hall to, have to put this, this overflow of cars into our neighborhood. Again, we all went to college. I went to college in New York City. NYU, they had very limited parking as well. And same situation. They have X amount of parking spots. If you don't have a parking sticker, you find another way to get there. It's unfair, it's not our problem, and we should not solve it. I really hope that the Board of Trustees hears the whole community and really resolves to move to action quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen Kitzinger.
Stephen Kitzinger, 110 Mayhew Drive. I'm here to speak about the personnel issues and the statements that have been made by the village president and Trustee Levison. It seem to be in direct conflict with one another, particularly with regard to Robin Klein. You gotta move closer to the mic. Sorry, thank you. Village President Torpy commented publicly that he was thanking Ms. Klein for her exemplary service to the community, and it was really boiled down to an issue of whether or not to grant her tenure, and due to a fundamental opposition to the very notion of tenure, the board had concluded not to reappoint her. Then Trustee Levison came out and said, oh no, tenure was merely a side issue. There were other problems. Now I find it odd that he would make that statement following Mr. Rother's lengthy commentary at the last meeting, which I finally had an opportunity to watch last night, about how she hadn't timely submitted a rights notice, making it a public discussion of her personnel matters. And yet Trustee Levison took it upon himself, apparently, to speak to the press and say that it was not merely the tenure issue that was cited by the village president. Moreover, I see you have a resolution on agenda to appoint a probationary police officer. Is he going to be allowed, or is he or she going to be allowed to complete his probationary term and effectively obtain tenure in his position so that he has certain civil service protections? Are you going to decline to allow anyone to obtain civil service protections in their title? Or are you simply going to remove everyone the day before they would obtain tenure? How do you expect, you have 4 municipal officers who are granted tenure in their titles by state law. 2 of them are now vacant. How can you possibly expect, given the public statements regarding tenure, to get qualified, experienced individuals to apply and accept the positions, given that they know they're going to be out on their ass in 3 years? Simply put, how do you possibly expect to get the best and the brightest, which is something I think we deserve to help run our community. We have huge projects going on constantly, and yet you seem to be okay with giving a no-show contract to the former CFO and then get upset when he doesn't show up and do the job. It's just beyond me how you can make these statements and compromise the ability of this community to function and this government to function. And I had no idea about the parking issue and side issue, but I cannot believe that this community would allow private individuals to direct traffic and not cite them. If I were out in the middle of South Orange Avenue or South Center Street directing traffic, I'm sure the police would have something to say to me about that and probably give me a citation. I certainly hope that the police have been instructed to take appropriate action in the event that this occurs again. Thank you.
Thank you. Alyssa Aronson.
Good evening. I'm Alyssa Aronson. I'm a longtime resident of this township. Good evening. Mayor Alice Paul Torby, Trustees, Councilman Marcus. I have two very important topics to discuss tonight. First, I want to thank Robin Klein for all her years of service. Now, you issued a special meeting you had on November 29th. You did not have it posted in the clerk's office. You violated the Sunshine Act. It was not kept in the clerk's office. What is wrong with this picture? And the revolving door every 3 years of a new clerk has to stop. Now, the second topic is going to be about doctors on the first floor. Town ordinance says we are not like federal laws or Mosaic laws. God does not present himself to the South Orange BOT and say, thou shalt not put commercial businesses on first floor. Town ordinances shall be repealed by a simple majority vote. This shall be done based on what is best for those who live in this town, those who work in this town, and those who spend money in this town. The BOT will be judged by how they base on success, whatever it is the quality of life in this town, but improved or gotten worse.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak at this time? Yep, just please come up.
Hi, my name is Suzanne Hevner. I live on Mercer Place, 134 Mercer Place in Tuxedo Park. I just want to stress we do appreciate everything that you're doing. And in terms of short range, medium range, and long range, I hope short range is this week. In terms of medium range, I don't know if you're looking to other towns that have this similar problem where there is a, like Montclair, Bloomfield, there's a college right smack in the middle of the neighborhoods, or the neighborhoods are in the smack in the middle of college. Perhaps they have some ideas. I do have a friend that has a similar situation in Montclair State, and about 30 years ago, they didn't have parking restrictions, and a child was hit by a car. And that's when I go to my short term. So I really, really hope. We have so many kids in our neighborhood that like to ride their bikes. Kids that are walking home from the middle school, kids that are walking home from Marshall, and all the cars are still there. The sight lines are really hard to see around the corners, and I would hate if anything happened like that on your watch and in our wonderful Tuxedo Park. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Arthur Nesbitt. I'm 16 South Center. I was actually inspired by the village president's conversation about all the things he had done to try to mitigate the situation with Seton Hall. And what it inspired me to think about was that, why are you working so hard on behalf of that university? And the reason I say that, the fact that you're moving so many mountains and trees to help them figure out their problem that they created which affected the residents of your community, I think I see why, but I'm just not really clear. What I'd like to see is that a dialogue starts with two parties that want to have a dialogue. You have to respect one another. And if I don't respect you, I'll do what I feel like and then ask for your forgiveness. I think we have a situation here where they are doing what they feel like and will ask for your forgiveness later. And they don't even want your forgiveness, they just want to do what they want to do. I suggest that in the future, you use your police department not to ask them to close the gate, but to make them close the gate. And in the future, tell them if there are any cars that are out in the public domain and any individuals in the public domain directing traffic when they should not be, they will be arrested. Then you have a position where you have a little of authority, you're using your authority within the elements of the law, and maybe then they'll come to the table. But you can't come to the table if you keep begging them. You're begging them to come to the table, and they are telling you when we feel like it and how we feel like it. I suggest you step forward and be a little more aggressive in the fact that you do the things that will support the people in your community. We are taxpayers. I pay a full ride. I don't get any credits, nothing, right? So I'm a voter in this community. I suggest that you start trying to protect my interests and not worry about so much where they can park or how they can park. You tell them you'll enforce the rules that are on the books about parking in this community. And you do one other thing. I was down at the Rutgers game this weekend, and I was in New Brunswick. And I went to Rutgers in the 80s. So I'm not going to say exactly when, but the 80s. And 30 seconds. One thing they did there, the town of New Brunswick said, we're going to work together. And what they posted was during the week, Monday through Friday, there are restrictions about parking all over the place. And that's what you need to do. That's a very simple, put the restrictions up all around that community, protect our communities, and talk to them later. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Gail Davis. I live at 140 South Center, and moved to Tuxedo Park about 7 years ago or more. And the reason why we bought the house, because it's an amazing neighborhood.
Just a little closer to the microphone, please.
It's an amazing neighborhood, and it's just the quality of life. And in the past 2 weeks, it just has not been the quality that I'm paying, my taxes for. I have had to call the police for the students urinating on my front lawn, for them having loud conversations and parties and just smoking weed in front of my house at 3 o'clock in the morning. I have had to call the police because they're drag racing in the middle of the night. And once again, we have children in our neighborhood. So I don't understand why Seton Hall, if they want to be a bully, that's fine, because Tuxedo Park can take it, because we're going to come back at them. I just think that there needs to be a dialogue. I think that they need to work together with us to make this happen, and not just to be like, well, this is what we're going to do, accept it. It's unacceptable, and as a taxpayer, I do not like it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gina Nesbitt, 16 South Center Street. I know you can't ask a question during this period, so I guess I'll state this as a statement as opposed to a question. My understanding is that an agreement has been reached with Seton Hall for whatever prorated amount of taxes or whatever that payment is called. I'd like to know that that information is publicly available for anybody to have access to it.
Thank you.
What's the plywood amount?
Yeah, we'll get to that. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak at this time? Okay, thank you. At this time, I'd like to close public comments. And before we move on to the rest of the agenda, I do want to do the best job possible in trying to address some of the things that were brought up and summarize a couple different things. So just quickly, the 5 things that, that we did, the steps that are being taken today that will make a difference tomorrow. 1 is that the gate is not allowed to be open again. 2 is that security guards or public safety personnel will not be allowed to be in the street or in the neighborhood or doing anything involving directing traffic or anything like that at all. With the exception, just to make sure that that statement is crystal clear, that the 2 temporary spaces on South Orange Avenue Ward where we are asking them to relocate, we did allow them to help people make sure they fit in between the new designated spaces there. But they are not directing traffic. They're just helping make sure people don't go past where they're allowed to go past, just to give that caveat. 3 is that we did help them find alternative spaces on our own property to help mitigate some of their concerns. And we pushed some of their medium-term solutions to a little bit more of a short-term. That's number 4. Number 5 is that today they notified their students to discontinue using Tuxedo Park as a place to park. So those are a couple of quick takeaways. Some of the issues that were brought up, one that a few people mentioned is that the spots that are being shuttled are not actually for students, they're for employees and contractors. So they're for people that would stay there the whole day. Basically, the university can't really tell students, to that degree of strength where to park or not to park. You're right, no students would ever drive to Maplewood and take a shuttle in. But for contractors that are working a 10-hour shift, they can require that vendor have all their contractors park somewhere else and they can shuttle them in. So the idea is that will remove enough spaces, 120 or so spaces, just from that located off-site, that those are now 120 spaces that students can use on campus. We have, a few people did ask about, I think, signs for parking in Tuxedo Park. Those have been ordered. They were ordered maybe last week, so they should be here probably this week.
They'll be installed starting tomorrow.
Yeah, so that's happening already. Is more signs that designate exactly what the parking requirements are on the street. Someone asked them a question about permission and who gave what permission. There was never any permission. The only permission that was given by our police department to Seton Hall was during move-in day, or the 2 days for when freshmen were moving in, that the 2-hour limits were basically allowed to be laxed a little bit so that people could, because they didn't have parking on campus, that people could park, take all their furniture, and not have to worry about moving their car all around, with the idea that that would actually limit the amount of traffic instead of forcing people to park, unload half their furniture, then move somewhere else, and then repark. So that was done for that 1 or 2 days, and I think that perhaps that was misunderstood to think to be extended beyond that, which it certainly was never implied explicitly or otherwise that would be allowed to happen. There was a comment about our police chief being up there today, standing there. He went up there because I called him and asked him to go up there after Trustee Collum sent an email this morning, I assume having heard from residents that are probably here tonight, that this was still going on. And as soon as I got that email, I called our police chief. I said, get down there and tell him to close that gate this second. And I came down there. I left a meeting and came down there as well and had a conversation with their public safety director. There are a couple other issues that were brought up. I just want to maybe wrap up parking before we address the other ones. And that I think that there's been some sentiments expressed tonight as far as how we deal with Seton Hall that are interesting, and I'm certainly no diplomacy expert. I would say probably none of us are, although I think we're trying to do our best. But we want to build a relationship with them. We do have both the carrot and the stick in this situation. Today was the carrot. Thursday was, and I think that today was the last straw. And I think they understand. I don't think I need to repeat the conversations that we had with them up here, but they understand that this can't happen again, ever. And there are consequences to those actions. And again, I don't think that the best thing for us to do is to talk about those consequences if tomorrow everything is the way it should be. If it's not, there's a next step that we can move to, because we do have some of those tools that people have mentioned, because at the end of the day, these are South Orange streets. They are our streets. They are not Seton Hall's streets. And it is up to us and the police department about what happens on those streets. So at the end of the day, that is the bottom line. So I don't know, again, there were a couple other comments that were made. I don't know if any trustees have a comment on any, or an answer to the tax abatement for that Seton Hall pays. The pilot, yeah. That number is about 300 and...
Excuse me, it's not a tax abatement.
Right, it's a payment in lieu of taxes, called a pilot. And that's about $365,000. So were there any just kind of direct comments to any questions that were raised?
I have a couple of questions, and that's regarding some of the residents looking for how quickly we can implement an ordinance for parking restriction. And I think they're you know, I want to understand that process in
Just
regards
make sure
to.
you're talking to the mic.
You know, to that regard, you know, we can discuss it's an ordinance, and obviously, you know, it's going to take a few meetings to do it, but the village president always has the right to do a 90-day order to put in restrictions. So if we feel that we want to extend the restriction, so if there's 2-hour parking on several streets and we want to extend that 2-hour parking to the other streets, the village president can issue an order for the next 90 days to have the same 2-hour parking, and we can work on the ordinance in the meantime. Or we can just wait the 90 days, you know, while we're working on it, you know, while we're trying to get ordinances done on all those streets. And I know that we've discussed a couple of streets already with the Transportation Committee, and we want to look at the village as a whole, because there are other neighborhoods that need this same kind of restriction for various reasons, not the same reasons. But I think that in light of that, the fact of what you said before, that some students are likely to continue parking there anyway, that we probably should put an emergency order in there, because it's one of those things about being proactive and not waiting for them, because my guess is that, you know, we can't do it by tomorrow, that some of these students are going to go to a couple of the streets where there's no restrictions and just show up there and park there, because yeah, that's the way it is.
So one of the things that I was going to ask at the end of this discussion, but I can ask now, I suppose, is do I have the board's support if tomorrow these problems are not solved? You know, there's nothing to do tonight, obviously, but if the problems are not solved and we do see that happening, I'm ready to do that. And if there are no objections, that just makes that a little bit easier.
I'm just encouraged that, you know, we have that legal ability to do that. And so I learned something today regarding that, and absolutely.
Okay.
I do want to go over that a little bit more. As I communicated to the village president, I support anything in the interim between this board meeting and the next one to get this issue resolved. One of the, and I have the Google Maps up, the public safety issue is the one that concerns me the most right now, and the double parking that's occurring, we're not going to be able to get emergency vehicles through. The issue that I heard about today with the buses now doing the drop-offs in the middle of the street, this is so unacceptable on so many levels right now. How would the board feel about temporarily suspending parking on one side of the street on every street in Tuxedo Park? Just post the notices there. I like that idea because I don't want to penalize all of our residents and just eliminate parking altogether, but having parking on one side of the street, and the notices that we do for special events is no parking, just line it.
But if we have restricted parking, because that may accommodate the residents and also prevent the students, because they go to classes for
But some streets don't have any restricted parking. 3 of them don't. So if we just knock off one side on every single street, that's in Tuxedo Park.
It's very simple for me, cut and dry. Put in any immediate restrictions we can, balancing out the fact that we don't create any imposition on behalf of the residents. So whatever that is, and it appears that we have the ability to make those types of decisions.
What do you think?
Let's do it.
I think we should see what happens tomorrow, and if the problem is not solved tomorrow, then I think we need to do it. I mean, I hear some ones in the audience, look, at the end of the day, it's 9:18 right now. There's nothing we're doing tonight that's going to take effect tomorrow morning that already hasn't been done today. So we had conversations, and I'm sorry we can't get into a back and forth, but we had conversations with Seton Hall. They agreed to a whole number of our demands to fix this, and if they do it tomorrow, then it will most likely solve the problem. And if they don't do it tomorrow, then we have to take that next step.
I would be going through tomorrow as if the problem is going to be there, so you have everything ready to put out there Wednesday morning, the notices and everything.
Right, we will be ready. I mean, that's not hard to do.
I mean, tomorrow morning means printing the notices up so DPW can get out there.
They have the notices. That's all ready to go. If tomorrow there is a problem, there will be no problem at all in making a very large decision, whether it's eliminating all parking, whether it's eliminating one side of parking, whether it's doing restrictions. We can do any of that tomorrow for Wednesday.
You have my support to do it in terms of that, and I would work with the police chief on whether it's one side or no parking at all.
And one thing I'd like to add to that, if you could identify maybe someone who can leave with the clerk, 1 or 2 representatives. You need a point person so you can expedite things to get feedback. So let's say that decision is made that we need to do restrictions of all parking, and if that's too much of a burden on the residents, then that the person who's their point person can communicate with the community and say, these are the restrictions we need, one side or these streets. And so we can calibrate the parking restrictions based on the experiences. So if one person can be identified from the organization, if they have a chair or something, so that you could communicate and give that person an update on a daily basis that can be pushed out.
Yeah, we've certainly been talking to the neighborhood association, and that has been extremely helpful. So let's make sure to keep those lines of communications open. And, you know, obviously if there is, you know, today, you know, I went out there, you know, myself this morning and everything seemed fine. You know, at the time when the first classes were starting, there were no cars out there. And then later in the afternoon, it started up again. So getting that feedback from people is really important. I really can't. Can we talk after the meeting? Thank you. We can't really do a back and forth once we close public comments, unfortunately.
I just want to add one thing to this, is that I think you have to be very careful when you're doing the streets and identifying that you don't limit it just to the streets that we've been discussing tonight, because when you make a decision that close off X, Y, and Z streets, it just flows over to a couple other streets. So if there's a street right next to, you know, Mercer that allows on both sides, or King, whatever it is, you have to make sure you look at those surrounding streets. So you may actually have to go to several other streets outside that main district that's there today. It may actually encompass a larger area, and that means you have to get word out to those residents as well, because these things have a way of bubbling, as we found out from the parking for the commuters, that people in most areas were willing to walk 3/8 of a mile without a problem. Once it goes beyond 3/8 of a mile, then it starts to become an issue. But we're dealing with younger students, half a mile may be their limit, their tolerance point for walking. So you have to be paying very close attention to those streets and not create a problem that we move one problem from one neighborhood to another neighborhood.
I don't know if my colleagues on the board support me right now. I still maintain that we should be proactive right now. If those things, I don't want to wait and see.
I think that
in terms of something that we
there's
can
no
do as a
question
board,
that I
let's
said.
get signs out tomorrow and just eliminate it.
I totally agree, but what we need to do is understand what are the things that we want to do for tomorrow.
Oh, I
One side
understand
is-
them right
no,
now.
no. We should discuss what they are.
What do you think, Howard? I want to eliminate parking on one side of the street on every single block in Tuxedo Park. And if it moves to another block, then the village president can
Just
step
so you know,
in.
that doesn't actually solve any of these problems, right? I mean,
Why not?
Because then everybody just parks on the other side.
Well, that's fine, but I mean, right now in the interim, if students are going to one rather than two, my primary concern right now
The
is
expectation is that they're not going to be
public
going
safety
to any. My worry, I mean, and it really doesn't matter if you guys want to make a decision to do that. I would say it would be, you know, probably not the best decision.
Well, explain why not. I want you to understand my perspective being our emergency vehicles, the buses.
Of course, and we actually have had our fire department up there, and they had problems on South Center Street, and that's why every single pole on South Center Street has an emergency no parking sign right now, because there were cars there, and they couldn't get through, and we sent the ladder truck up there, and it didn't fit, so we put signs up down the entire street.
In terms of the other streets, what's happening right now? Because from what I understand from the residents, there's double parking on both sides on the streets that don't have any restrictions right now.
Right.
Is that correct?
Yes. Right, parking on both sides. But I don't think, I mean, we had them up there, and that was the street that they identified they couldn't get through. If there's another problem, you know, we can fix it. If you want to, I mean, again, if you guys want to do it tonight, you know, go right ahead, but it doesn't really solve, I mean, it doesn't really solve the problem, right? If there are 100 students that are parking up there tomorrow and you eliminate one side of street parking, now you just have 100 cars just on one side, which perhaps is better, but now the residents have no places to park because you eliminated half the parking spots that are available in Tuxedo Park. So there are no parking spots left at that point.
If they're already
So I'm just saying that there's no
students-
decision here that anyone can make that doesn't have a consequence.
Sure.
And I guess what I'm saying is that today we spent many hours meeting with Seton Hall and talking about what a solution should be, which is that there shouldn't be anybody, there should be no students parking in Tuxedo Park. That's the solution. The solution isn't to push them on one side of the street. The solution is this is not a parking lot for students. And they understood that very clear today, that was over. And so if that continues, there are a whole bunch more things that we can do. But I think it would be most appropriate and respectful, even though we haven't necessarily been respected completely throughout this process, to allow the fact that we made a decision today with Seton Hall to give them an hour, give them 4 hours to let it work or not work.
The problem is if you wait on it, during the midday, once the kids park there, or anybody parks there, it doesn't have to be students. Once someone parks there, they're entitled to park there. You can't put the signs up after the park. And my concern, I understand it could be an issue getting those signs up by 6 a.m. And to Sheena's point, obviously for the public safety issue, doing one side is better than none. We can always take a different step the next day, but we could start with the one side right away. It's just something that I don't believe for a second, because this problem has happened before. It's just never been to this extent. There's usually been 20 or 30 students that have parked there.
It's like 150.
And it's also been a lot of students who just don't want to buy the permit, have always looked for places to park, which has always been a problem. And by the way, just for the record, we did meet with residents on certain streets who didn't want restrictions. They felt 2 or 3 students parking was no big deal. But I would certainly encourage the one side of the street. I would also encourage residents to take your cars out of the driveway early in the morning and park in front of the houses and park the students.
They shouldn't have to do that.
I know they shouldn't have to, but I would do it anyway, just to stop it.
But that's actually not the right thing to ask people to do, because they're going to get tickets out there also. If the police are...
Not if they're parking on one side you're allowed to park on.
But the one side, unless it's only on the streets that have no restrictions, then that's correct. But on the rest of the streets, there are 2-hour, 4-hour restrictions. Okay.
But we should put those same restrictions on those streets at the very least, and in the streets that are too narrow, and I don't know which ones they are at the top of my head, any street that's less than that magical 30-foot number wide, we're going to have to go to one side of the street parking, just like we did on West End, because emergency vehicles can't go through.
I mean, we can very easily ask our police department and fire department tomorrow morning to go up there and go back through all the streets again and say, are any of the parking regulations that are on any of these streets not sufficient to allow an emergency vehicle through? And if they determine yes, then that's right there, on that second, there will be no parking signs put up.
But again, what was brought to our attention today was the system with the buses. And we were given all the different streets in Tuxedo Park where it's a problem with the double parking that the bus is letting kids out in the middle of the street. And I think that's unacceptable too.
It is. But I think...
And if anything, Mr. President, I'd really like for us to send a message. It's great that they said they're going to work on all these things over the next 2 weeks. I want us to be very proactive tonight and decisive as a board of trustees and have something posted tomorrow morning. And if we have to go out ourselves and post them, I
will. Are you saying that you discussed a contingency plan and you basically don't want to say exactly what the particulars of that?
No, I can tell you right now what was discussed and what was told to them, that if that gate is open again, there are police barricades going up on that street. If there are any Seton Hall personnel in public streets, they will be removed by the police department, and see if there are any Seton Hall vehicles in our public streets that are not allowed to be there, they will be impounded and towed. Okay, so that's what was told. Basically, that if this continues, that's what's happening. Yes. Okay.
But the problem that we have is whether or not they open those back gates or not, as some of the residents commented, the students have been directed there. In fact, it was in the Setonian, the last edition on Thursday, go find the public parking spots. They know it's there, so even if that back gate is closed, they're going to drive out the front gate and go straight into Tuxedo Park, and it's going to start flowing in that way as well.
So one side parking addresses a safety issue, but it doesn't really...
it's not a long-term solution.
No.
Well, and it also doesn't address any of the issues about people parking in Tuxedo Park.
I think it does.
It doesn't, though, because you're not eliminating any of the cars from the area. You're actually condensing them into a smaller area. So I'm not saying if you want to go ahead and do that, that's fine, although I think that the more appropriate thing to do would be to ask the fire and police department to go out tomorrow morning, take a look at the streets, and close whichever side they determine is most appropriate for them to do, rather than us randomly picking a side of the street
I don't want to pick the side. I just want them to be instructed to close one side of the street on every street in Tuxedo Park.
But just so you
they determine what that street is.
Right, but just so you understand, right, I mean, again, this doesn't actually solve the real problem, which is that people are using this to park, right? That's understood, that doesn't in any way...
It doesn't solve it entirely, at least in my mind. It solves a little bit of it.
It doesn't, though. It doesn't solve any of it, because the same number of cars will be entering Tuxedo Park. They'll get there, they'll see that one side of the street is closed, they'll park on the other side. So what you're doing
and when you run out of spaces, you're getting out.
No, you could do the same thing. You could do one side of the parking with a 2-hour restriction or a 4-hour restriction.
Right.
Yeah, so Whatever, 2 hours. 2 hours. We have to do the same as in the other areas.
The other thing that I think you opened up the meeting with is that you described some alternatives, such as Seton Hall is going to be parking on the grass, or we're opening up spaces along South Orange Avenue and Ward. Those are relief points for whatever congestion has been occurring in Tuxedo Park, where we can put some restrictions on some of the streets. We had a relief valve by some other solutions. And I think we have to look at it holistically.
I think that's a great point, Trustee Levison. Why don't we
So
try
there's a
it?
balance that we need to take, but the caveat is that I want to make sure that the residents have a ability to park, because I think one stated before that she was going to have something happening at her home during lunch.
Agreed.
And, that too that's a quality of life, and they should be able to park in their own neighborhood.
And they should be able to have guests over too
Right.
and park.
Right, but
You have to consider that.
Right,
also.
but the consideration of that, which is very important, that
That's
residents should be
balance.
able to park in front of their own houses. What I'm offering to this board is that if the problem isn't actually solved tomorrow, and the same number of students go up there to park, by eliminating half of the spaces, you are now making it 100% impossible for a resident or a guest of a resident to be able to park there. Because now you have reduced the demand or the supply of parking spaces, and the demand has remained the same. So if you're not sure that the solutions today will work, then by doing this, you're actually possibly making it much worse for people to be able to park in front of their own houses. Now, it might make it better, because if there are very few cars up there and you put them all on one side of the street, you open it up and maybe it's a little bit better. But if the same number of cars goes up there, is simple math, the same number of cars goes up there and there are half the parking spaces, they will all get filled up and residents will have nowhere to park. Residents, you can't say no Seton Hall students on one side, but residents are allowed to park. We don't have the legal ability to do that.
I certainly understand that, and
But you have created a relief in other areas.
It's already packed to capacity as it is. Residents are already not parking in front of their own homes.
Well, no, it
so
wasn't-
it's going to inconvenience everybody for a little bit, but what I would like something is short-term, temporary, that sends a message and alleviates the double parking on both sides of every single street in Tuxedo Park. It looks like giant stadium. It's like tailgating out there.
Right. Of course, but there's,
Like, why would we not?
Village President, to your point, just to put the restriction one side of the street parking with 2-hour limitation on that side.
I agree, and I'm making that a motion.
It's not.
I move that we eliminate one side of parking on every street in Tuxedo Park and allow for 2 hours on the other side, to be determined by the police and fire department, whichever side they want.
2 hours.
As long as they stay consistent.
2 hours on the side that we allow parking. All the other rules ignored,
yell,
just an
2-hour
order
parking
from the
on one
village
side.
president.
Just for 2 hours of the day or 2 hours consecutive?
At a time, one person.
Yeah, I just want to, I just want I would like to add the caveat that that's during the day, because at night, you don't.
There's
need
already
those-
no parking,
You don't, no, in the evening, there's evening parking.
Yeah,
Which-
all
which-
the hourly restrictions are 8 a.m. to 6 p.m.,
Right.
Monday through Friday.
And because in the evening, then the residents don't have to worry about it, because the streets are available for their use. So
Yes,
I want to
agreed.
make it
I'm
clear
sorry.
that it's just a.
Thank you for that clarification.
Want to make a motion?
She made it.
I second. I second.
So there's a motion by Trustee Collum to ask our police and fire departments to close one side of the street, of every street in Tuxedo Park, asking them to specify which side.
Yes, they can determine what side. On the other side, that's available from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., 2 hours. Only
And
2
just-
hours.
Just
And-
to further clarify, the streets that currently have no parking on either side, that doesn't open up a side. And also, I believe part of South Center is only 1 hour, and we're not expanding that to 2 hours. Right? So anything that's already
Agreed.
more
Anything
restricted,
that's
we're not
on the books
expanding.
That's already
Okay.
restricted, don't touch that.
And one
Thank you.
point of clarification, is this a temporary measure?
Yes, absolutely.
How
Under
long
his,
is the term?
under his power of 90 days.
Under the
Other
village
than-
president, and if it doesn't work,
And this has to be a recommendation to the village president, because he's the only one that has the power to do this. No matter how
Yeah,
you vote.
and it has to be that.
pretty
way,
sure
because
by
other-
board vote we can do this.
No,
correct?
No, you're
He's the one with the
ordinance, but the
No,
short-term
authority
no,
is
this
by
is a
ordinance.
recommendation to the
Right.
village president, because he has the emergency power.
Yeah, we have to
Not
do
gonna
an
it by
ordinance. If we want to continue it, we have to pass
It
ordinance.
has to be an
All right.
ordinance, because we need hearings and everything like that to make it
The
permanent.
ordinance process easily takes 90 days, so that's,
All right, so we have a motion and a second. One more comment, I guess, to President Torpy. Will you honor this vote tomorrow? It is a recommendation.
Well, the only thing particularly now we're adding hourly restrictions, we're clearly getting into like kind of custom-made, albeit paper signs. So the likelihood of having those by 6 a.m. tomorrow, pretty slim. If they were just the police ones, no parking. That part we could do. The hourly restrictions on the open side, I doubt we'll have those signs ready.
As soon as we can get them done.
So emergency, no parking on one side.
Yeah, those are already pre-printed, they got stacks.
Oh, he's saying emergency, no, so you're saying no parking on one side?
One side.
Okay.
Those, the
Yeah.
police have stacks of those signs
Right.
already pre-printed.
And then we get the other ones
But making
fixed.
2-hour
And then when
ones,
you
we
get
don't keep us
the
those in.
the time restrictions and stuff, you can replace the,
Well, those go on the other side of the street.
Well, the problem with those, then, it is a challenge for residents and guests, because those will be people who want to stay for all day. So there, you're not getting turnover. If you, then I agree with what Alex was saying. You're now effectively reducing the ability to have, there's no supply. People are going to move.
I mean, of course I will honor what the board's asking me, but I mean, everybody should understand this very much so eliminates or reduces the amount of parking that residents have access to in front of their own home.
and that's
I
okay, let me
understand
add
that.
that. And
understand
if after a week or a few days, the residents feel that this is too extreme, they can come back and you have the power to modify it.
Why don't we ask the
Why don't you just
neighborhood
give my home
association,
address?
Pardon me?
Go ahead.
the neighborhood association to give us feedback on the implementation of the restriction?
Well, and we can do that, and we'll have our police department up there, and they'll check things out and take a look at how many count how many cars there are and how many summons are being issued, like they've been kind of reporting back. And if there's somehow a continuation of the problem, which I suspect that this would only compound the problem if there will be one tomorrow, then we'll have to revisit this. But
Okay. I've said everything I need to. There was a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Sorry.
Yeah, I would just add that the majority of the residents there have driveways. So other than visitors, it shouldn't really be too much of a problem for them. And if, in the short term, if you've got visitors and you can work out some extra space in your own driveway, then do that.
Park your car out in the street.
But also, isn't there relief for that? Come to think about it, if they're having visitors or something, are they able to call the parking authority and give it the license plate so they have that option?
no, not to overrule the legal restrictions that are in place during the daytime. That's for overnight parking.
Oh, I see.
But you can't just call someone and say, well, this person doesn't have to pay the meter, they're visiting me.
Well, I wasn't talking about that.
But I mean, it's the same thing, it's the hourly limitations, some are enforced by meter, some aren't.
All right.
So there was a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed, abstentions? So the recommendation to me to ask our police and fire department to do that tomorrow morning will be done. And I will let you guys know the outcome and try and continue to report to you, as I think we've been doing over the past couple days. Okay. There were
Just one comment, going back onto the Seton Hall pilot. The pilot is a voluntary pilot. They don't necessarily have to volunteer that contribution. It is totally voluntary. And
Yeah, no, they are, by state law, exempt from property taxes, and regardless of whether we like it, and believe me, every community that has a university in it deals with the same thing, providing services and not having a tax exemption.
just as one thing is that we try to put a public safety legislation within the state, and we still would like to see that move forward, except we haven't been able to successfully move that within the legislative.
And I just want to add lastly, for the residents to continue providing us feedback, especially Wilma, thank you so much for all your emails and keeping on top of this with the Board of Trustees. We appreciate the emails that you're sending us, because a lot of us aren't in town during the day and we don't see it firsthand, so I've been relying very heavily on the residents to let us know what's happening on the ground.
Thank all of you for coming tonight. And if you do want any more information, if you just leave your email address, some of yours we have, but just leave it with Mr. Lerner down there. That would be great, and we will let folks know any different changes, anything that's happening, and if you can distribute it out to your networks, that would be much appreciated. Moving on, we have an ordinance on...
Excuse me, there were a couple other points that were discussed.
There were.
One of them...
Wait.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
One of them being some misinformation about our Animal House ordinance, and maybe Steve want to, I think the inference was that we allowed fraternity houses.
It was no choice, that's the law.
Okay. No. There absolutely was no change made by this board with regard to the number of parties that can live within a house. As a matter of fact, all of that is a matter of state law, both statute and decisional law by our courts. And this board has literally no control over those numbers that can reside in any particular
But in
dwelling.
fact, we put restrictions around where we could in our code so that we protect whoever, both the neighbors as well as the kids who were going to
To the extent,
reside.
to the extent that this board could impose restrictions, it has already done so. And that has been an effort several years ago that was very intensively looked at.
And there were a couple other comments. One about public stuff as a 301 platform.
Right.
The question about how many times it's been discussed. Probably 20 times in these board meetings.
In the
I
last
think every
6
single
months?
every single meeting we've discussed it.
Yes.
And how many of those other projects that have been done? Maybe 1 or 2. The website being
Correct.
one, and Everbridge or emergency notification system being another. And the phrasing, talking about magic thresholds is kind of crazy. New Jersey law is pretty specific to statutes about when something has to be competitively quoted and when something has to be bid. And when something has to be competitively quoted, you get competitive quotes, and when something is bid, you have to bid it. And it is no doubt to our benefit to get things below that threshold because A, that's cheaper, because the number is lower, and B, we actually save tax dollars because the bidding process itself actually costs money. So for example, in staff time that has to prepare the bids, that has to accept the bid packages, and so for example, with this one particular software platform that's been discussed dozens of times here, in these board meetings and in the finance meetings and my reports all over the place. That this particular platform that we're moving to called Public Stuff, we actually compared it to 4 others. So we went below the 3 quotes and we actually got 5 quotes. And this was not the number 1 cheapest, I think it was number 2 or 3, but it was by far the best. We tallied a matrix of 18 different variables, added that up, and Public Stuff came out way ahead of anything else. So it was done pretty logically, pretty quantitatively. We're getting a pretty fantastic deal. And the kind of spin that's out there in the community about bidding versus quoting, I mean, I don't really quite understand it. And maybe we need to put out that public purchasing 101 thing so everyone can understand a little bit better when something is a competitive quote and when that's appropriate, and then when it goes to bid and why those lines are there, and that those are all state statutes that we follow.
But you're leaving out one thing. So just because we don't do an RFP or go to a bid doesn't mean we don't get competitive quotes.
Right.
We still get competitive quotes, or we use the state contract, which has already done competitive bidding, or an RFP process. So when something, like a police car is a perfect example, we don't go out for an RFP for a police car. We go to the state contract or one of the cooperatives, which is the Morris County Cooperative, and I forgot the other big one. And we look whichever one has the best deal available, and it does save us the money from doing an RFP, but it just becomes sort of redundant to actually do one, especially when there's already there under the state contract. Another great one is our paper. All the paper that we use in Village, on our minutes and stuff like that, comes under a state contract through Staples or one of the other, I think it's Staples now. And we have a state contract which gives us a discount off the listed price, which happens to be a significant discount, which we would never be able to get without having the state contract. So it's just sort of a misnomer to say that we're not getting competitive bids when we don't go for RFP, because every single time we have them, we've always gotten competitive quotes or other bids, or gone to the state contract process, which has already gotten the bids.
So we're looking to bring some clarity to this matter by putting out purchasing 101.
We have a draft.
So that anyone.
There's a draft of it to educate people about this. And one of the other things too that was brought up about civil service positions and protections about police officers, they don't have tenure. And civil service, being a civil service employee is not equal to being tenure, otherwise they wouldn't be 2 separate things. So tenure is something that is only granted to very specific officers of a municipal corporation, the clerk, CFO, tax collector, tax assessor. And as we've discussed a little bit in the prior meeting, it is almost impossible to remove someone who has tenure. And there was a case where someone had 25 unexcused absences from their workplace. They were not a clerk, I don't think. They were another one of the 4 statutory positions, maybe a CFO. And anyway, 25 unexcused absences, didn't show up to work for 25 different days, never told anybody why. Didn't matter. I believe what happened is they actually got terminated, and then the court basically said you couldn't do that. And you better believe if there was a police officer or any other civil service employee who did not show up for work for 25 days, they would be let go, and there would be no problem with civil service with that. So there is a huge, monumental, gigantic difference between being a civil service employee and having the protections that are allowed to you by that, and being a statutory municipal officer with tenure. Is two completely separate things.
Well, I'd like to go back to the statement about something that I was quoted in the paper, that tenure, to me, the tenure issue was a side issue in our deliberation. I think the other board members as well has that as a...
Can't hear you.
Yeah. You have to start over again because we couldn't hear you.
Going back to the question about tenure as being a side issue, it's not something that just came about. It's something that we've had a discussion, and I think the rest of the board really needs to talk to. It's not that we don't want to have any tenured positions, that in the long term, that's something that we would like to see, as well as a lot of other issues that we have with the various statutory system. If a person is eligible for tenure, they should be getting tenure, and that's as far as that I can discuss that without getting into some other issue.
And I'd just like to state, too, that tenure was a side issue. There were several opportunities for the individual to, through rights notice, for us to have what our concerns were discussed in public, I think 4 times, and that individual refused. It was definitely a side issue to me. Tenure was not an issue that I was interested in leveraging any of our political capital when we have so many other major concerns and issues here in South Orange with the development, with water, with all those other issues. It's the statement that was put out reflecting the board was not approved by me, and it was not something that I would have done, because it created an impression that that's what it was all about. And for most of us who did not look to reinstate the clerk, that was just a side issue. There was major issues that, if giving the ability by the person, it would have been discussed in public. And because of the rights notice, we can't go into that detail. But I want to thank you, Trustee Lovison, for bringing it up so I can have the opportunity to put that out there, and also state that I would have not put that statement out as such, because it created a perception that was not accurate.
Thank you. And there was one other comment. There's a comment made about the meeting not being okay, but I'd like to move on. So
I was just going to say that, I also wasn't, the tenure wasn't an issue for me, and in the past I have voted to give tenure to people. So there's the, most recent, I think, was the tax collector. But I'll let you go on, because I know we had this on the agenda for later, part of this discussion.
About the meeting not being noticed by proper sunshine laws, but council could confirm that it was noticed by all.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
And it was placed on
all of the requirements of law.
Posted on the website, posted
on the bulletin board,
in media, on the bulletin board. Yeah. So I'm sorry, but we can't really do a back and forth.
It was more than 48 hours.
So at this point, we're going to move on to, unless there are any other comments from public comment. Unfortunately, like I said, we can't get into a back and forth. If you'd like to wait for the second public comment period, you're certainly feel free to do so. Village Hall renovation, there was a comment made. Mr. Lewis, I think you'll probably address that in your update.
I can do that.
And maybe if you can just make sure to note how many times we've discussed and voted on various aspects of this, and how many 4 or 5 years ago the money was bonded to actually do it. I mean, it's happened.
The night that we bonded the money, the big bonding money, we actually all made a statement that we accepted Village Hall, that was the renovation. And I think it passed 6-0, so.
I think so. So moving on to ordinances for second reading and public hearing. Ms. Smith, could you please read by title?
Ordinance 2013-15, an ordinance to amend certain sections of the Code of Township of South Orange Village, Chapter 152, Section 11, to allow the South Orange Parking Authority to retain certain fees collected for parking permits.
Thank you. This just moves some parking spots along Ridgewood Road and 3rd Street from our operation and control to the parking authority. At this time, I would like to open the meeting up for public hearing. If there's anybody here who wishes to speak about this ordinance in particular, please come forward. Seeing as there are no members of the public who wish to speak about that ordinance, or no?
Any of the ordinances?
It's about 2013-15.
There will be a separate hearing on the next
Yep. Seeing as there's no members of the public who wish to comment on this ordinance, unless there are any other further questions or comments from the board, I'd like to ask for a motion.
I move it.
Moved by Trustee Column, seconded by Trustee Levison. Could we please have the roll?
Sure. Roll call. Trustee Clark?
Yes.
Trustee Column?
Yes.
Trustee Davis Ford?
Yes.
Trustee Levison?
Yes.
Trustee Rosner?
Yes.
Trustee Schnall?
Yes.
The board passed ordinance 23-15 on second reading. Ordinance 2013-16, a bond ordinance authorizing capital improvements by and for the Township of South Orange Village and the County of Essex, New Jersey, appropriating the aggregate amount of $1,035,000, therefore, and unauthorizing the issuance of not exceeding $983,250 in the aggregate principal amount of bonds or notes to finance part of the cost thereof.
Thank you. We've discussed this in a lot of detail before, but this is our capital budget. This includes some repairs to police headquarters, purchase of police vehicles, road construction, some other deferred maintenance, and some technology and communications equipment. At this time, I'd like to open it up for public hearing. If there's any members of the public who wish to speak about this ordinance. Seeing as there are no members of the public who wish to speak about this ordinance, I'd like to close the public hearing, and unless there are any questions or comments. Yep, Trustee Levison.
I think this goes back to the comment being made about Village Hall previously. There is a list of items that are in this ordinance that we are now giving approval to appropriate funds for those items. We will pass resolutions as we develop solutions or meet the objectives that we have under this bond ordinance. But this is the appropriation of those funds.
Okay. Have a motion?
I move.
Moved by Trustee Levison.
Second.
Seconded by Trustee Davis Ford. Can we have the roll, please?
Sure. Roll call. Trustee Column?
Yes.
Trustee Davis Ford?
Yes.
Trustee Levison?
Yes.
Trustee Rosner?
Yes.
Trustee Schnall?
Yes.
Trustee Clark?
Yes.
The board passed ordinance 2013-16 on second reading.
Okay, we have a handful of consent agenda resolutions. I'm going to try and get through quickly.
Okay. Resolution 2013-203, resolution hiring probationary patrol officer in the South Orange Department of Public Safety, police/police force. Resolution 2013-204, resolution hiring a per diem telecommunications dispatcher in the South Orange Department of Public Safety/police force. Resolution 2013-205, a resolution hiring a per diem telecommunications dispatcher in the South Orange Department of Public Safety/police force. Resolution 2013-206, a resolution a resolution authorizing the execution of a lease with Seton Hall University for storage space at 525 South Orange Avenue in the amount of $12 per annum. Resolution 207, resolution authorizing the purchase and installation of network and computer hardware and infrastructure equipment from and by Vion Corporation in an amount not to exceed $49,889. Resolution 208, authorizing, 2013-208, authorizing execution of an agreement with the Morris County Cooperative Pricing Council to become a member for the remaining period of October 1st, 2011 through September 30th, 2016. Resolution 2013-209, resolution authorizing a contract with Continental Resources, Inc., DBA, Conrace, for the installation and implementation of VoIP telephone equipment in an amount not to exceed $35,000. Resolution 2013-212, resolution appointing 2013 Fall Baird instructors in the Department of Recreation and Cultural Affairs. Resolution 2013, excuse me, let me just back up. Did I skip one? I believe I skipped Resolution 2013-210, resolution hiring fall 2013 basketball program assistants in the Department of Recreation and Cultural Affairs. Resolution 2013-211, resolution appointing 2013 Fall Baird instructors in the Department of Recreation and Cultural Affairs. Resolution 2013-212, resolution hiring 2013 Fall Soccer referees in the Department of Recreation and Cultural Affairs. Resolution 2013-213, resolution appointing 2013 Fall Season Baseball Program assistants in the Department of Recreation and Cultural Affairs. Resolution 2013-214, resolution revising meeting location for the remainder of the 2013 annual meeting schedule of the Board of Trustees. Resolution 2013-215, resolution appointing Tom Morris as a member to the Senior Citizen Affairs Advisory Committee. Resolution 2013-216, a resolution for 2013 pay raise for certain part-time union employees. Resolution 2013-217, a resolution hiring a part-time clerk typist in the South Orange Building Department. Resolution 2013-218, a resolution authorizing submission of a grant application and execution of a grant contract to the New Jersey Department of Transportation for the Terrell Avenue Section 3 project in an amount of $225,000. Resolution 2013-219, a resolution authorizing an agreement with Public Staff.
Thank you. Just quickly, two things on here. One is the first resolution for probationary patrol officer. One person had asked me about this, and that this was that we had already authorized 2 probationary officers to go to the police academy. 1 dropped out, so this is replacing that person. The next is the public stuff. So I just want to very quickly, before we approve the money for it, even though we've discussed it 100 times here before, just remind if there's any residents that may be watching now for the first time, that this is a 311 service request system. What this does is something that we've been wanting to do for a long time. And what this means is that for streetlights out, for signs missing, for potholes, for a whole slew of basically any non-emergency request that you have as a resident, what you'll be able to do is take a photo of it on your phone and submit it to us. You don't have to go to the website and find our email addresses, and we don't have to take that email and forward it to the department head, and they take that email and forward it to their worker. This is an entire workflow for us, so that when something gets submitted, depending on which category it is when you submit the item, it goes right into that department's workflow. They can track it. You get a notification when it's completed. It's a really, really great system. A lot of cities are moving on to it, and they're starting to become more affordable, for smaller towns like us. So this is going to make reporting any issues around town, hedges overgrown, again, there's a million different examples, really, really easy to do, and it makes it much more efficient for us. So even though we are spending a very, not a large amount of money at all on this, it is most certainly going to save us money in the long run, because our employees are going to work so much more efficiently. Instead of having to send thousands of emails back and forth, everything goes into dedicated workflows. When one person checks something off, it notifies the next person. It's their time to do the task. And then when everything is done, it notifies the resident and says this has been completed. If it's not to your satisfaction, please let us know. It allows us to track all of those things, see how long it takes us to fulfill those service requests, which means that we can actually set some performance benchmarks and say, okay, well, this year we got this many requests and it took us this long to do them. Next year we're going to do a little bit better. So it's a really, really, really great program, and what we think we're going to be able to actually expand it to be able to do outside of just the service requests is not only take Open Public Records Act requests through an online form, and we may be one of the, if not the only town in New Jersey that would be able to do it that easily, and we would likely, we're still working on some of the technical integrations, but likely be able to take all the permits and applications, dog licenses, anything on our website. They have to download the form now and print it out and come in. You'd theoretically be able to do in this system, and we'd be able to track all of that, and you could pay with your credit card right in there. Just makes everything work much, much, much better. Saves everybody a lot of hassle and a lot of money.
I have a question about that.
Mhm.
What's the timeline on implementation for it going live?
A couple weeks, 2 weeks probably. We're basically working on integrating it with Everbridge, our emergency notification system, so that instead of people having to sign up for 2 different accounts, that they sign up for 1 account and it populates to not only these 2 systems, but any system in the future that we may use for anything.
So you would say by the 1st of October, this will be...
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that this will, unless something really crazy happens, this will be ready to go by then. And we'll make a big, kind of a big fuss about it to the media and folks that are here, trying to let people know that this is available now and they can download the app. So thank you. Yeah, so we would expect by the end of the month that this will be.
But it's incremental.
Ready to go. Yeah, and yes, that's right. The service request piece will be live by then, and the apps and all that kind of stuff. The Oprah requests and things like that will be coming further down the line.
One more question on that. I went to the website. It looks great. Do they go to, when somebody submits a service request, does it then go to a third party that redirects back to our staff? It seems like there's a disconnect from, I looked at the samples that they had from their website. I think it was New York and Los Angeles and a few other places. And when somebody uploads a photo or a pothole, it looks like some third party is responding back to them that the information, so it goes direct into us? Okay.
It also, the good thing is it also is 24/7, so if someone
That's right.
On a weekend, when people tend to notice these things the most.
That's a great
They
point.
can send it, they don't have to worry about remembering to call Monday morning or something like that. They can do it on the weekend or in the evening or 2 in the morning when you wake up.
And they get a positive response.
But it's
Right, you get a notification every time immediately, and what's nice for us too is that, from our perspective, we can put a, monitor down at, the Public Works Department that will show a map of South Orange with the line around the borders and a little pin where every request is, and so when they're figuring out where they're going to send folks out in the morning, the whole thing just becomes a lot more efficient. So that's really exciting. And just to clarify, I just don't want to misspeak at all. This is not a internally hosted solution, so it is a third party, right? It's on their servers. We don't host it in the building or on our own servers. So I just don't want to misspeak to that. But there's no, they report it and it goes directly to us, but they own the. Like Google or like anything, they own the software and it's on their servers.
It's a cloud application.
It's a cloud application. Thank you.
Yeah, I just pulled it up. So somebody submitted, cooked meats or something like that, and then there's somebody who's responding back to the resident, and then it has them listed as public stuff administration.
Those are probably
So
test
those-
submissions
Okay.
on the website that they're showing.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. I just want to be
Yeah.
sure that every time,
And
it's
they
an
are
accountability
public.
thing.
You can mark it as private when you submit them.
Yeah.
But the idea is that actually if you submit something and then someone else submits something, you can see that someone else has already submitted something. So unless someone marks something as private, they're all publicly available. Anyone in any town, and it's actually kind of the cool thing about the company in general is that if you download the app, then if you go to another city and you're hanging out and you notice something, you can actually just pull up the app and say, I'm in this city now. Or you could let the phone GPS tell you where you are and you can just submit it there. So it kind of allows you to be a little more civic in your hometown, but also anywhere else that happens to be using this.
But that's, what you're looking at is exactly the way we tested the application to make sure that it was the right thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and
That's
we've
my
had
thing.
it. We've had it installed. I have the app on my phone right now.
Is it working good?
Yeah, it's cool. It's
No,
very cool.
it looks
And in fact,
fantastic.
in the app itself, we can actually put our own things into the app. So one of the nice things about this is we actually get basically a free South Orange app out of this. So when you download this, the way I have it configured now, we have a sign up for emergency notifications. We have a sign up for the library website, a sign up for weather information. We can put all different links in there. A link to our Facebook page, a link to our Twitter page. So we can design that app and that, comes included as part of it.
This is exactly what I saw earlier today, and I just want to be sure of it, because I do want to support it. Somebody had done a litter request in New York, and they showed the picture of the couch. And then the public stuff admin wrote back to the resident, "Thank you for submitting your request using public stuff. We have contacted New York City 311 to notify them of this issue. We will promptly notify you of any updates we receive from the city. Please let us know if we can provide any further assistance."
Yeah, I don't know what that is. It
So-
goes directly to us. Our email addresses, your email, we're already in there.
Okay.
So when the notification, I don't know why. I don't know. I can't explain
Maybe
that.
a big city issue, they may have to have, somebody basically on call at all
Right, they
times.
may not have they may have a different system that they use for their city employees, and this system doesn't talk to it. I don't know, but for us, this is the only system that we're going to be
Or
using.
somebody uses the test vehicle to report a problem.
Okay. As long as, I'm
But yeah,
fine with
it goes direct
Just
from
to
when the
make sure
submission
we're
goes
not
in.
relying on somebody else.
Basically, the administrative backend, you put in the email addresses for each different type of submission that exists. You put in the workflow. So when you submit something that's a public works request, it goes to public works. If you submit something, a gas light out, for example, we'll have that automatically notify us and notify PSE&G.
So my question is, will we get an opportunity to see this as a test run, as an application on our phones or laptops or whatever prior to the full implementation to the
Yeah,
public?
we can certainly let board members have access, before we fully release it,
I
if
would
you
like
want to.
that.
But,
So I would
we're
like
going
that.
through kind of all the testing and stuff now.
No, I'm not interested in doing the testing. I think you're more able to do that, but I like to see as a user, a resident user, what the process is and if it's a user-friendly application. So.
Yep, yeah, it is. And they have some videos, and you can go through some of it on the website. I mean, you can actually download the app on your phone right now and use it for another city that's already live. So you can, and it's the same interface, just with different, logos and branding and stuff. Anyway, I don't want to take up too much more time on this. Were there any other questions or comments on anything on the consent agenda?
Comment on 206, and just say that the storage facility, which is $1 a month, $12 a year, and thank you very much to the administration for negotiating a great deal, because that comes in significantly lower than what we were anticipating. And this
What
is
is about the savings?
I don't remember what the number was that we originally looked at, but I know it was more than $1,000 a month.
Yeah, it was pretty safe.
And so this is the third item that's come in well under the budget, and I know we're about to have a fourth one that's also going to come in.
Our asbestos abatement.
But it's good to see, because we know there'll probably be overruns in other parts of it, so every penny we can save now definitely helps the project.
One more question. This is for the Finance Committee. The resolutions authorizing IT equipment, that was all previously approved in on the capital budget? Okay.
I have a question on 208, and that's really for Barry. The Morris County Cooperative is where we got the new police cars from?
That's correct.
Yeah. Have you looked at it enough to know, are their prices in general better than the state contracts?
Not always, but they frequently are. I've had a lot of experience with that co-op. It is a very good co-op. They offer some things that you can't get that are somewhat more local. They're very good on some of the paving. Frequently, their rock salt is cheaper than the state contract. A lot of times their fuels are cheaper. We always compare as many sources as we have, but it really is it's incredibly well run and has a really broad, better than the other one that we're already a member of.
Can you send me a link?
Sure.
Because I'd like to get in there and look at some alternatives.
Well, I don't know if you can look at all the contracts, but I don't think you can get the details. You have to be log on to it.
Unlike
No, you can
you
get it.
guys.
I just got the PDFs and not the details of it, of the specific contracts.
Well, you can always ask the administrator for the
Right.
details, but the Morris County Co-op has definitely been successful.
There's hybrids on there.
Okay,
I move the consent
I
agenda.
have one quick question on 218, on the Terrell, that's between, is that between Grove and Center? Or is that also good from Grove to South Orange Ave?
South Orange Ave.
The whole stretch?
No, this is the third phase, what they're calling the third phase.
Yeah, we already
piece,
have
yeah.
one section that's about to get
One-
underway.
yeah,
right.
So, but
This is-
I guess the
this
question
finishes
is,
it.
this grant money, is that the full amount of the paving, or this is to offset the, what is the full amount doing now?
I don't know what
We have to
the,
go to bid
I'd
on it, it
have
was
to look at the
estimated to be
application, the
more.
engineer's estimate. Generally, DOT grants don't fund 100%, but they're frequently, based on the engineer's estimate, you can get 50, 60, 70%.
Usually they come in
grant coverage.
50%, that's the target, and then we usually get a little bit better, so we wind up getting 60% of the grant. Right. Every now and then we get lucky and it winds up being 70.
it's historic.
Okay, are there any more questions on consent agenda?
I'll move the consent agenda.
Okay, moved by trustee Rosner,
Second.
I know, I saw
seconded
it.
by trustee Column. Can we have the roll, please?
I did this one on purpose. Second. Trustee Davis-Ward.
Yes.
Trustee Levison.
Yes.
Trustee Rosner.
Yes.
Trustee Schnall.
Yes.
Trustee Clark.
Yes.
Trustee Collin.
Yes.
The consent agenda has been passed.
Thank you. At this time, we need to convene as the Alcohol Beverage Control Board. Could I please have a motion from a trustee to recess the regular the special meeting of the Board of Trustees and to convene as the Alcohol Beverage Control Board of the Township of South Orange Village to consider the person to place liquor license transfer application.
I move.
13 cases to 5 Clover. Moved by trustee Davis Ford, seconded by trustee Levison. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. Could we have roll call for the Alcohol Beverage Control Board of the Township of South Orange Village, please?
Trustee Clark.
Yes.
Trustee Collin.
Here.
Trustee Davis-Ward.
Here.
Trustee Levison.
Present.
Trustee Rosner.
Here.
Trustee Schnall.
Here.
Village President Torpe.
Here. Thank you. We have one resolution in front of us.
Resolution 2013-221, a resolution of the Township of South Orange Village authorizing and approving a person-to-person to place-to-place liquor license transfer application from 13 Kids Inc. to 5 Leaf Clover LLC.
Thank you. And before we get to board discussion, I do want to report that all of our departments, police, all the different, all of our departments that are required to do research and report on whether they approve of this request have done so and do approve it pursuant to all state and local laws. And I don't think there were any comments that we need to consider from any of them. Is that correct? Mr. Lewis or Ms. Smith?
No.
That's right, there were no outstanding comments?
No concerns, no.
Okay.
I do have a comment.
Mhm.
That the last time that I looked at their application, the ownership was 104%.
That's been corrected.
That was fixed.
Thank you.
But we do appreciate your math skills. If there's no more discussion, I'd like to ask for a motion.
I move.
Moved by trustee Column,
Second.
seconded by trustee Schnall. Could we have the roll, please?
Sure. Roll call. Trustee Levison.
Yes.
Trustee Rosner.
Yes.
Trustee Schnall.
Yes.
Trustee Clark.
Yes.
Trustee Collin.
Yes.
Trustee Davis-Ford.
Yes.
And don't forget.
And
Yep.
President
And President
Vote on this.
Torpe.
Yes.
One of the few times you're gonna vote.
That's what you guys do up here?
Can I ask a question about this?
No, sure.
So, does anybody have a sense or a knowledge of, this is at the old Stuffed Shirt location?
Right.
That's right.
Does anyone know when they're expected to start to?
Yes, I could say I've had conversations with their attorney today. They are closing on the 30th of this month, so you can expect to see things happen shortly after the 30th.
Okay. And so do they expect to be open by the end of the year or
Oh,
next
that
year?
I don't know, but I can tell you that the
Which
actual
year?
closing is taking place on the 30th.
And then for those in the public who don't know, I guess that's that large empty building adjacent to Toro Loco on Valley. Okay.
I move to adjourn the Alcohol Beverage Control Board and reconvene the regular meeting of the Board of Trustees.
Second.
Moved by trustee Column, seconded by trustee Clark. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay. We're now reconvened as the Board of Trustees. I'd like at this time to ask if there is any member of the public who wishes to speak please feel free to do so. Seeing as there are no members who wish to speak at this time, I'd like to close public comments and ask for an adjournment of our special meeting.
I move.
Moved by Trustee Collins, seconded by Trustee Levison. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we are adjourned from our special meeting. At this time, I would like to call to order this meeting of the Board of Trustees and our conference agenda. Could we please have the roll?
Sure. 1 moment.
Sorry, that was a little quick.
It's okay.
That's okay.
Speedy. Mrs. I. Excuse me. Right. Roll call. Trustee Clark.
Here.
Trustee Collum.
Here.
Trustee Davis Ford.
Here.
Trustee Levison.
Present.
Trustee Rosner.
Here.
Trustee Schnall.
Here.
Village President Turpie.
Here.
Also in attendance, Barry Lewis, Village Administrator, Stephen Rother, Village Council, Adam Lerner, Deputy Village Administrator, and Chanel Smith, Acting Village Clerk. Adequate notice of this meeting had been provided to the press in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, NJSA 10:4-6. In addition, notice of this meeting was posted in Village Hall and on the Village's website and has been filed in the office of the Village Clerk. Official action may be taken.
May not be taken.
May not be taken. Excuse me.
I realize we just made a mistake, which is that we adjourned our special meeting even though we should have recessed it so that we can reconvene in executive session. Right?
Well, I think you already announced that was recessed earlier. I don't know whether that matters.
But we just...
No, you can, you can,
take
once you start the executive session, you can continue it on the same.
So
There's no
that's okay that we just adjourned
Yep,
the other meeting?
You're fine, you're fine. You can continue your executive session.
Darn it. All right, so I'm going to be quick. I've got my report here. And I do want to remind everybody, I've asked this in a few conference agenda meetings. Please provide bullet point updates for your committee for the conference agendas. In the future, people who don't submit bullet points will not be included on the agenda. Yes. The question was, is that a threat? And the answer was yes. So I've asked people to do this. I do it every single meeting. Mr. Lewis does it almost every single meeting. Mr. Rother, we need a few more bullet points here, although most of them come up in executive session.
We don't get this on the job form. I haven't seen any submissions from you or the village administrator.
No, these aren't agenda items. These are discussion. These are your updates. They don't
so
go
you
through the
want
agenda.
us to send bullet points to you directly?
Yeah, for the agenda so that the members of the public know what we're talking about during conference agenda.
Okay.
So we've talked about that. Everyone's agreed to do that a couple times. So if everyone could just please just basically send in a couple bullet points of what you plan on reporting on in your committee. Obviously, you could not talk about what you put. You could talk about something other than what you put. But the idea is that this agenda doesn't actually say anything about what we're discussing. And I think it would be better for the members of the public if they knew, okay, well, I met with that committee and they are going to bring this up in the board meeting. So if everyone could just try to remember to do that, please, that would be really great. My report. Shared services, we've been having quite a few shared service discussions, a few with Maplewood, and also a few really great discussions with Mayor Warren and other folks in Orange. I think one of the things that we've talked about is that shared services for us is not just looking at Maplewood, which is a phenomenal partner in a whole bunch of different ventures, but that we really want to look bigger than that too, and that the real benefits, the real cost savings that people love to talk about when they talk about shared services is really more regional efforts at some of these things. And it's not just 2 towns, but it's 5 towns or 7 towns or 11 towns, getting on board with doing something together. And there are a couple things that we do so incredibly well here that we should be able to basically contract with other towns to provide that service for them. For example, one of them being our IT department. And we have an amazing IT infrastructure that Trustee Levison knows in and out. And we should leverage those kinds of resources that we have to basically become a leader in those fields by having other towns purchase those services from us. So we had a great discussion with folks from Orange. I think we want to have more discussions with more people from other towns that are around us on some specific things. And I don't want to get into too specifics just because some of them are actually being negotiated. We're looking at more specific kind of projects with different towns, but in general, this is the first time since that I've heard that we've had a meeting with, a serious meeting with a town outside of Maplewood about how we can share services. And it was a really productive meeting, and there is probably a really, really big benefit that we're going to gain on the water issue, which is really exciting because I think we need a little bit of help there in getting through that. And it seems as though there are some other towns that are going through similar problems with their water. We're kind of the little guys in those situations, and hopefully we can join together and figure something out. So that's really exciting. It was a really constructive meeting, and I don't imagine that anybody from Orange is watching the meeting right now, but if you are, thank you for meeting with us. It was great. Quickly, a couple updates. The website, we spoke to the folks from MetaRhythm that are putting the website together, and we're going to get basically the not the live version, but the website installed, designed, ready to go. We've had the designs finished for some time. It's just basically developing them, the difference between the design and the development process. So we will actually have a website, hopefully this week, next week, that we can start loading our content onto, which is going to take a little bit of while. We've got an incredible amount of years and years old. We've got 4 different versions of the Public Works pages all available on our website right now. The second to latest one I actually find the most user-friendly. And so we're basically leaving all the stuff behind. We're going to archive it that we don't need, and move everything we need to keep over to our new website platform. And if people are interested in seeing what that will look like, we're going to be showing folks a little preview at Newcomers Day. So if people want to see what the new design is going to look like, it's pretty exciting, and people can take a look at that. And at that point, we'll post it up on our current website too. We'll do a little before and after. Everbridge, our emergency notification system, is done, ready to go. We are waiting on integrating Everbridge with public stuff so that we can have one account sign up. We've been creating all the groups in Everbridge. I have got a request out to PSE&G, which they have not answered yet, to give us their circuit maps so that we can place circuit maps on our emergency notification system, so that if we get notice that a transformer blew out in a particular neighborhood, we can send a message just to all of the people who are fed power by that transformer. So that will be a huge, huge step forward in our ability to communicate with residents, especially during power outages. So Everbridge, again, it's done. Everything's installed. We've been trained on it. I've got the app on my iPad. We're all ready to go. We're just waiting on the one account sign-up piece, because we get only one chance to get as many people signed up as possible. And if we have to do that twice, one for one and one for the other, we're going to really dilute the number of people who do that. So we want to make sure we've got that all squared away, which, like we mentioned earlier, will happen in the next couple weeks. Machine readable data ordinance. This is something that I'm kind of excited about. Which is, we do a really great job, and we've been doing a really great job for years in this town of putting information online in machine readable formats. That basically means that it is not an image of a PDF. You can scan something into an image, and you can scan something what people call OCR, or into text, so you can search it, so you can sort it. Spreadsheets are an example of machine readable data, something that any program can take and search and sort and use for some other purpose. Image PDFs you can't do anything with them. So the idea is that there's a lot of information that we have that we want to provide the public access to, and our budget is probably the best example of something that went from a non-machine readable format to a machine readable format. It used to be put up in a PDF, which is great and helpful, but now it is put up in a spreadsheet, which means that if you or if anyone out there wants to do anything with that, you can take that, plug your own numbers in, you can run it through algorithms, program, whatever. And what's really great about machine readable data is that they are actually really great springboards for economic development. If you look at, for example, anybody who's used like a subway app, like going into New York City or anything, and you look at like those apps that will tell you where the trains are and where the stops are and all that stuff, that wasn't developed by the MTA, that wasn't developed by the city of New York, there's a whole bunch of those apps that were developed by private developers because the MTA made all their schedule information available in a machine readable format, and now it opens up this door for innovation and people being able to create really cool things on top of that. So there's a whole lot of opportunities of people being able to do that with things like housing data, code inspections, COs, complaints, any municipal record of anything that has happened, on a property, for example, could be made public, and could be made public in a machine readable format that would allow someone to create a database and say, well, you're buying this property, here's the whole history of things that have happened at that property.
Is that some way related to GIS?
I mean, GIS is kind of in the same field of trying to take information out of a format and putting it into a standardized format that anything can basically read. And these records in particular would be linked to something's location. So we're not doing that one quite yet, but that's a really, really cool thing to do. The things that we do have that can be done already is the budget, is the bills list, is I think our own voting and attendance records at our meetings should be in that format as well. I think that all of our open requests should be in that format. All of the service requests that come in, basically anything that comes in and out that we can collect in a machine-readable format that we do, and make that available. So
And
we already...
That can be integrated in the future to something
Yes, that's right.
robust like
That's
the
right.
GIS.
That's right. And you could build upon that in a million different ways. And so anyway, we do a lot of this already, but it's not codified in any way. I think one of the things that we've all learned is that we should codify things as much as possible, especially when we do a good job of it. So this ordinance would codify that, would require governing bodies in the future to collect, store, and release information in these kinds of formats. So it's not up to any one particular elected official to do it or not. And then what I'd like to be able to do, and I'm working on that with a whole bunch of folks that do open government transparency work in New Jersey and some other states to make sure it is the right ordinance. And then really do a big push with some partner groups like the Citizens Campaign and some others to try and get this adopted in other towns around us, and see if we can't get enough groundswell under this to get a couple dozen towns to adopt an ordinance like this, and then see if we can get the state legislature to either do it themselves, which they don't do now. In fact, they're completely exempt from pretty much everything from the Open Public Records Act. And also see if they would provide incentives for smaller towns that don't really know how to do these kind of things to do so. So along with this ordinance is also going to be a narrative case study that I'm writing up about what we've done, things that we've done really well that we should tell other towns about. So I'm really excited about that. It's not ready yet, but like has been said in the past, I want to make sure to bring it up before it comes up for a vote. It's probably a meeting or two away from being introduced on first reading. Happy to circulate things to people if they're interested in it.
Can you please send that out to the board?
Yep. It's still pretty drafty right now, but maybe in a week when I've got it a little bit better shape. So anyway, so that will go out, and hopefully we can again be kind of a leader in pushing these things forward on the municipal level in New Jersey. Mr. Lewis.
Yeah, I had a couple items I wanted, and I'll try and keep them brief. On the Village Hall move update, we're moving along at a really good pace. All the credit for that goes to Mr. Lerner, our Deputy Administrator, who's done a great job. That was one of the projects I assigned him because, candidly, a year ago I was concerned how I'd be able to fit it into my schedule. He's done a really good job organizing, getting everybody on board. I think the staff now finally believes it's actually going to happen because I've seen a number of them packing, so that's encouraging because it was sort of the boy who cried wolf syndrome that our seasonal people have been moving tons and tons of boxes and records out to our storage that was in the lease that was referenced earlier this evening. We are currently scheduled with the movers for the weekend of October, I believe it's 4th, 5th, and 6th, the 4th being a Friday. 5th and 6th, with the current plan being to then open our doors on Monday, October 7th, across the street. We're working out some of the final details on some of the computers and phones and things. There's a possibility that could get pushed a week or two, but right now that looks like a pretty good date. With respect to the renovation update, we continue to meet and have regular meetings with the architect. The next step in the process, you recall, we went out to bid for our asbestos abatement. Mr. Rother and I and our engineer will be meeting with the parent low bidder tomorrow just to go through some of the details in the bid and then ultimately making a recommendation. That is an example that you'll recall from prior meetings. We were carrying a number of a $600,000 estimate for that item based on the engineer's estimate. We actually had, I believe, a total of, it was about 15 bids total, but 7 of them were below $400,000, and the apparent low bidder is less than a third of what the estimate was. So it's an example where you have a sort of a budget. Typically and understandably, your professionals, when they provide an estimate, they're conservative. They err on the high side. It's always easier and much better news to get good news that it came in under budget than over budget. So certainly we hope that trend continues, but there's no guarantees. To that point, again, we would anticipate having a recommendation, make an award of the asbestos abatement on September 23rd. They will need some time to get their permits in order and the paperwork, so that will time out, right in line with our vacating, because obviously we need to be out of the building before they can commence their work. Also at the September 23rd meeting, we'll have what's a required public hearing on our pre-qualification of general contractors to do the work. We're utilizing a process that's authorized by state statute to require interested contractors to provide their qualifications, require a certain level of experience in historic renovations to make sure that you get a good qualified contractor. So there's a public hearing process required for that. That will be on the 23rd. Then we'll go through the process and ultimately go out to bid for the entire renovation. To that end, a gentleman, and I don't see him here, but perhaps he'll watch the video or is home watching this evening, but the question's been raised, I think, a number of times about when was there ever a vote to do the renovation. And the nature of a project like this is there are just incremental votes along the way. And this started back probably, I think it's 4 or 5 years ago, when there was an initial appropriation by ordinance approved by the trustees to sort of put out the seed money to hire the architects for the professional services. I think that was approximately $300,000. Probably those most significant indication of the commitment came in 2011 when there was a vote by the Board of Trustees on 2 different bond ordinances. That was 2011-14 for $3 million, 2011-16 for $2 million. That $2 million was sort of a combination of previously appropriated funds that were canceled from whatever projects they were for and specifically dedicated to the renovation. So clearly at that point, the majority, if perhaps unanimous, I wasn't here at the time, but certainly on a bond ordinance, it had to be a 2/3 majority, so at a minimum of 4 trustees at the time, could have been all 6 or 5. At that point, committed and appropriated $5 million towards the project. In addition, there were votes along the way to authorize initially a grant and then subsequently approve grant agreements for $669,000 for a New Jersey Historic Trust grant for the project, and another $150,000 for a National Park Service Save America's Treasure grant. And each of those, required approval of a grant agreement. That's sort of the commitment you're going to do the project. So in total, those sums add up roughly $6.2 million. So certainly within that sort of context, there have been steps along the way. Subsequently, we approved the architect to do the design work. We approved a contract with a construction project manager. So there, at every step of the way, there's a sort of a continuing commitment. I guess the final vote will be when we get the bids in, and assuming they're within budget, when you finally vote to award that contract. I guess that's sort of the last step. But it's not just a one vote, thumbs up or thumbs down. But certainly there have been multiple votes along the way that have indicated that intention. And those were the updates. I'll limit it to those given the hour.
Barry, given the scope of this project, it probably would be helpful, and I think we've talked about this, just getting a blurb on the village website. This is probably one of the larger projects the village has undertaken in quite some time, and while I don't dispute anything you just said, it just kind of helps to have everything in the same place for the public's benefit.
Sure. You're talking about the different steps in the history of what was voted on when? Absolutely.
Well, I've asked Adam as well to put together a spreadsheet that basically goes through the major points of the renovation, what the original estimates were, what the revisions were, and what we came in with. So you can see a history as we go along. As we value engineer, because part of the process is to value engineer a particular step as we go through it. And if it's not within what we thought it was going to be, we look at an alternative.
The last time I believe the board got a formal update from the project manager, I believe was back in April. Are we going to be seeing a presentation like that shortly from him?
I just asked.
Yeah, I think we were scheduled, and the architects closing in on what's called the 90% completion. Last report was at the 50% completion of the design. We were very close to what's the 90% completion, and that's really is the final. And at that point, there will be a presentation. I believe that will include not only the construction manager, but also the architect and staff. May even involve the geothermal engineer, but that should be in the very near future.
Do you anticipate near future being September or October?
I would probably look at one of the October meetings.
Okay.
I would expect, yeah. Probably the first. That's our conference agenda. That's usually when we try and do presentations.
In regards to October, so our October meetings going forward will be in SOPAC?
There's a schedule here.
Yeah, and that was actually one of the resolutions, and that's a good reminder. I should have pointed it out, although we read it by title. The public may not have known it, but it is, and it ties into the renovation and the move. Obviously, when we move out of here, this room will no longer be available for the public meetings. Our standing committee meetings and those meetings that are not televised or recorded, we will have 2 fairly sizable conference rooms across the street in 76 South Orange, and we will be noticing those meetings for then. The Board of Trustees, Planning Board, Board of Adjustment, and the Historic Preservation Commission will be moving their meetings to SOPAC. Most of them we're able to do, it'll be in the main stage. We're getting set up with cameras. There is a little bit of the tweaking of the dates. So, for example, our meeting dates, and we'll get all this published out in a notice. There's a couple of dates. Well, one would have been a move anyway because November 11th is Veterans Day, so that would have been moved to the 13th regardless. But there is a schedule. We'll have it and then compile a complete notice of all the different meetings, and that should be published shortly. And we'll put a news item on the website as well, explaining it with a link to the new calendar.
Well, that's good to know. So our meetings, I just assumed for whatever reason that our meetings were going to be held in the loft, but they're going to be held in the auditorium.
Yeah, because that's where the camera and the recording will. There may be a couple that we will have portable cameras to move to the loft just because of a couple of conflicts with SOPAC schedule. I don't know that any of ours are, but I think some of the boards may, just in the early months, because SOPAC was, they were trying to hold dates, but as we kept pushing back, they couldn't hold them forever, and they made commitments. But
Thanks. Anything else, Mr. Lewis?
Nope.
Okay, Mr. Rother, any public?
Most of what I have, I'm going to be sending to the trustees in a confidential memo, status reports on litigation. I hope to give a thorough report here shortly on each of those items, but to the extent that there are going to be questions, they're going to have to be raised in executive session. There's only one matter that I have that I'm working on that's for public session, and I had hoped to have it ready by today, but I'm still working on it, and that is the code, the recodification, and I'm struggling mightily with how to present voluminous information to the board in a way that makes sense. And I finally have it laid out in a spreadsheet with the language of the code, recommendations from general code to the extent that general code has made the recommendations, problems that we see with the sections, and then recommendations that we are making. And there are many, many sections of the code based on various concerns, everything from preemption, unconstitutionality, old provisions that haven't been looked at for eons, all sorts of reasons why you're going to have to look at various sections of the code. And I finally, I think I have it in a format that makes some sense, and hopefully in the next week or so, you will be getting a memo from me and that spreadsheet so that you can look at it. And then I think we're going to have a working session. It's not just going to be a half an hour. It's going to be a couple hours where you're going to have to wade through all of those. But hopefully you'll have that spreadsheet in sufficient advance so that you can get comfortable with what's out there, so that we can step through it and you can decide whether you're going to keep provisions or change them, with the goal in the end that the recodification gets adopted and we can go online with the new format.
A question, would this be the appropriate time for you to give an update on the result of the RFP for the prosecutors?
Well, we had a session, I think that really should be raised in the executive session, the details, but there was indeed there were interviews, and I think the committee is in a position now to make some recommendations to the full trustees, which should be done in executive session.
Just want to, I'm sorry.
Me first, you first.
Go ahead.
All right. Mr. Rother, we don't have any independent water results posted to our website since June 6th.
Check your website.
Check the
August
website.
15th. No, on August 15th we have one, but between the time of June 6th and August 15th, there's nothing noted there for South Orange Village.
I hate to pass the buck, but I don't post the stuff on
Have we received it then?
the material is available. There is material available on water quality from the numbers.
What's the specific question?
If you're on the village website right now, the last time we had the independent test done was on August 5th, but then prior to that, it goes all the way back up to June 6th.
Yeah, there was, basically, they were done in some instances more than monthly, but they were targeted to be monthly, and there was a miscommunication along the way, and I believe it was in the June-July area where for whatever reason, we're looking to see if the tests were done and the results just not communicated, because there was a miscommunication as to who was providing access to the facility to get the water samples. So we are looking into that. I believe that there were tests done, but I need to find them.
Okay, and if you do, can you please
We
have
will
the
update.
website updated?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
As part of the recodification presentation, are you going to do payables as well?
Payables?
Yeah, those...
Oh, yeah.
Violations that you can-
Yes, yeah. That will be part of it.
Okay, Trustee Levison?
Yes.
Finance and IT?
I just have a couple items, one being that part of the budget that we, or one of the resolutions that we passed was giving the CCR funding. And part of that was to have a service level agreement signed, reviewed by the council and signed by the village president. I don't know if a meeting has been scheduled yet between yourself and Fred Profeta.
Yes, we have a breakfast meeting. 17.
Ah, good. And so that would officially allow funds or funding of the CCR, if in fact we have a successful SLA. The other is that we had a discussion about project planning, and it is the recommendation of the Finance Committee, since we do not have a project planning system, that we use Excel as a listing of tasks and dates and projected dates, and indicating dependencies between the various tasks, at least on the short term before we get a project management system. And Adam is now putting together some forms so that we can move forward with at least those capital projects that we have on board and want to finalize with project information. Anything else? That's about it.
All right. Hope the rest of them are that succinct. Trustee Davis Ford?
Our meeting is scheduled for September the 23rd, so I have nothing to report in regards until that time, but there's one thing that I would like to share, and this is regarding the Affordable Health Act, or known as Obamacare. I'm part of a Washington conference call on this issue for an update to be shared. Some of the information I want to pass out to you is for an Affordable Care Act Health Insurance Marketplace Outreach Enrollment Toolkit for elected officials. I think this information would be very, very valuable for you to have, that you can inform yourself so that you can share information with your constituents. I've also made arrangements. On the 23rd is the scheduled legal committee meeting at 7 o'clock. I have a representative from the Department of Health and Human Services. Dennis Gonzalez is an executive officer responsible for this region. He will come and make a presentation, and I hope that all of the trustees are here, so we'll notice it, public notice, so it'll be open to the meeting. I will hold the legal committee meeting here. Our meeting's at 6:15. I'll make it 6 to cover business that needs to be covered, and then at 7, a PowerPoint presentation will be made by the representative from Health and Human Services regarding the next steps, which is a big push in October of the implementation of additional benefits for the Affordable Care Act, and then there'll be an opportunity for questions. I might suggest for that day, because if there are a lot of questions, that we maybe push our meeting back a half an hour to 8 o'clock. So I'll make that request on the 23rd.
Oh, to accommodate the legal.
Right, yeah, to accommodate the presentation.
Right.
And I think that this will be a really, really informative meeting to have. But in the meantime, I made copies for you for elected official guide that
Thanks,
you
Deborah.
can do that, and that'll give you an opportunity to get some information for yourself so you can be informed and be able to ask the questions you need to ask. Is that enough?
I'm getting bombarded enough with this stuff. I go for my certification on the 26th.
Okay.
Get certified. Yeah, for this
All right,
stuff.
and that's it for me.
Mr. President, could I just step back, and I apologize, I should address it during my thing, but I did want to address, there was a suggestion made, I think, by a resident, and admittedly, we did have to post a couple of corrective agendas, but I want to just be sure that anyone watching I want to recognize our acting clerk, Ms. Smith, and also Ms. Kelly from the clerk's office, who did really an incredible job. She was kind of thrown into the fire here in very short notice. Did not have any access to job forms or anything, and never even heard of it until almost literally the day of the meeting, or the day of putting the agenda together. And it was, for a first effort on very, very short notice, and without it, I just want to make sure that it doesn't go unspoken that somehow that was any reflection on either Chanel, and Mary Beth also did incredible work, and I am very confident that it'll be even better and more organized next time, but I did want to go on record and say that.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. If that should have been said earlier, and yes, I appreciate you adding that now. Trustee Rosner?
Planning and Zoning Committee. We met on August 21st. The meeting was cut short due to, for some reason, Trustee Schnall and Com scheduled a movie the same night as the Planning and Zoning Committee meeting.
With closed captioning.
The first topic of discussion was the Planning Board had passed the Third and Valley with a conditional approval based on the definitions of live workspace, which we're going to go over, and the planner was unfortunately not able to make it to that meeting, so she should be able to make it to the next one. We can finish the conversation. And we also went over the Irvington Avenue partnership, which we're going to move along, which actually Trustee Collins taking the lead on. I plan to work on the committee with her, and then we'll see how that goes. And we're advertising right now for September 30th, I think, is the deadline for anyone who wants to participate in the committee. But even if the meetings will all be open anyway, so even if you're not officially on the committee, you could always come to the meetings, which I'm sure we'll advertise. And just, that's it for tonight. The next meeting is in 10 days.
Thank you.
And two things to the Irvington Avenue thing. The Development Committee is doing a walkabout on Thursday night.
Oh, right, yeah.
On Irvington Avenue, beginning at 7 o'clock. And the partnership that the board has with the Market Research Center at Seton Hall will be meeting at 5 o'clock this Thursday as well. So that's the beginning of...
What was the time?
Say that again?
Walkabout?
Walkabout at 7 o'clock, meeting in front of Blue Plate Special. Rosner's buying everybody dinner.
I think what we have to do is post.
I know, right?
I think under the community calendar, we're going to have to post Sheena's calendar also. So
Probably.
just
Just get it up there. And then at 5 o'clock is when we're meeting up at Seton Hall's campus with the Market Research Department.
5 p.m.?
Yes. Does everybody agree to the September 30th cutoff for volunteers? Because I'm getting a lot of emails from people who want to be involved. It got posted to the website. Thank you to Mr. Lerner. Last week, I believe, on Thursday. Do you think that's sufficient time? We'll cut it off on the 30th, and then we can update
we usually
the website.
We typically have done 30 days, and
Okay.
then, but as I said, this is the kind of meeting where it's going to be open to the public, and anybody can comment. And it will be even further, as that, as we know over time, some people make a commitment, then they can't make the commitment. So, obviously, we're going to welcome as much input we have, especially from people who live in that neighborhood. I think the other question was about people who live in the bordering towns, whether it's Maplewood or Newark, who are right there, who want to come to the meetings, which obviously we're going to hope that they do come and have input into that meeting at one point and buy in. And we're going to look for the buy-in from other people, including the elected officials, the assembly people who are involved, somebody from Seton Hall. and possibly somebody from the Ivy Hill group.
That was one thing I was going to ask the Board of Trustees, because I couldn't find it on the code. If somebody is a Maplewood resident, they can't officially be on any of our boards or commissions, but they can volunteer with any committee,
Yes.
just not in an official capacity. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And they can participate and give input or feedback, especially if it impacts them. Now,
Open meetings
I
to everybody.
just want to get back to looking for some involvement of our border towns, and you specifically said Ivy Hill. And so you want to recruit, do an outreach to encourage them to participate. Is that my understanding?
I think just for the first part, Trustee Rosner brought this up, is let's go ahead and get the smaller group from South Orange together. And then as per the village president's request at the last meeting, one of the things we're tasked with doing is making sure that we coordinate with Maplewood and Newark as we move, and Seton Hall as we move through the process.
I think by the 4th or 5th meeting, we'll be ready for the outreach to further groups.
And I know the Ivy Hill group, which borders there, is almost has the same type of activity and involvement in neighborhood association, much like our group that was here today. And I know one of the leaders in that group. So when you're ready, I can reach out to them.
That'd be great.
Okay. Trustee Collin, Public Safety.
Uh-oh, the mega report. All right, I'll condense. I'm going to first go over just briefly what we covered during our last board meeting. First, thank you for everybody who participated in National Night Out. The event was very successful. Also to the administrator for helping us get the police vehicles along. One thing that I'd like to do moving forward is try and pass the budget a little bit sooner so we can authorize those purchases earlier in the year. I'll cover new business and then move back to the ICMA report. One of the things that's been discussed over the past 2 meetings is the prescription drug drop box. We had a representative from an organization that had received a grant from the DEA regarding this, and it's something that Trustee Levison had shared some backstory prior to me taking over this role. And right now it's just a matter of working with the police department and the village administrator to see if there's some opportunity there. But on most part, the committee felt that it would be beneficial moving forward.
Do you have the date for the next collection?
Yes, I saw the email that you sent, and I'm speaking with the police department about it.
No, I mean, even Maplewood Police, I think, participate in that. They have
the county collection?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think there's a date set for that. I don't remember what it is.
I don't remember.
We should
off
get
the
that
top
out
of my
as
head.
well. Okay.
I'll send it to the administration, and we can post that on the website. The other thing that was an interesting topic that the village president brought up was headsets while driving. Generally, people operating motor vehicles with plugs in both ears, and we went back and looked to see if there was any state statutes on this, and unfortunately there isn't. So we looked at some other sample states to see what existed there, and where we left off was the committee was supportive of something, and we wanted to check with Mr. Rother first to see if there's something we could do locally, and the village president was going to follow up on that, and then I was going to take a look at sample state statutes to hopefully have one of our assembly members or a senator introduce.
So by plugs in both ears, I mean...
Like headsets.
Okay, so what is your issue? I mean,
Driving with, actually, Mr. President, did you want to?
Sure. Yeah, people should not wear headphones while driving. It's
You can't hear
incredibly
emergency
stupid
vehicles,
and
you can't-
incredibly dangerous, and I
hear.
can't believe anybody does it. It blows my mind that people wear both headphones and listen to music while they're driving. And I have been the person driving an ambulance, having someone almost crash into the ambulance, and they don't hear the sirens because they're driving and they're texting and they're listening to music, and they can't hear anything going on around them. And I would say, I don't think we're allowed to put people in prison for life for this. But that was the question to council of, what can we do as far as creating, because I was under, unless I don't remember correctly, that even talking on the phone or texting, one of those two or both of them started as local ordinances and then grew as more people started to adopt them, and eventually the state said, we got 100 towns that have done this, now it's a state law. And that we would be able to do the same thing with that. And that basically there'd be another ordinance and it'd be a local ordinance.
No, I just wanted to make it clear what we're
Yeah,
talking about.
it is for people. It is for people who are wearing both headphones or earphones while driving. Not one for talking on the phone, which is fine, but both both ears at the same time.
Okay, thank you.
Crazy.
And hopefully we'll be able to do something about that. There's 2 resident requests that we've been over, one being the Western Drive issue that's moved through Public Safety, it's moved through the Transportation Committee, and so I think we're just going to be sending that along to Mr. Rother next to review. And the most recent one that came up is an issue regarding Terrell and South Orange Avenue, so I've already passed that along to the Police Department. They've sent me a recommendation, and I'm going to send it over to Transportation and see if they have any recommendations, and I'll keep you posted on both those issues. And then finally, I wanted to do a detailed report of where we are with the ICMA study and the recommendations, but I'm not going to be able to get through all that, and I know we have a lot tonight. But just some major talking points is out of the 27 items that came from this report, 18 have either been completed or are in progress. The remaining items either have to deal with the schedule or the table of organization, and both those items I feel are intertwined, and I prefer we not discuss those because they are a closed session and a lot has to deal with collective bargaining. So I'd like to thank the other committee chairs for helping me populate this matrix, and my hope that I communicated to the administration and to the police department is I would like to have this report closed out by the end of the year. I think that 1 year is good enough to be able to address these things and codify our recommendations moving forward. And to reiterate to Mr. Lewis that the schedule really is the #1 item that came out of this report. So the sooner the better on that. And also wanted to make sure that in terms of the RFP being prepared for an architect for police headquarters, there's a few things there that we could talk about offline, but during our planning meeting, the regionalizing of dispatch was one of the items that was really kind of agreed to by this board of insourcing that. And so any new headquarters would have to take that into consideration. And I would really like our police department to be very intimately involved with any preparation for an architect. Lastly, I really wanted to do a special thanks to our police chief, Jim Shalell, who has been really fantastic to work with, especially taking me through all the different things that this report highlighted, and I really appreciate his work and the access he's giving me to his department to solicit input from our police officers. So it's been very good, and he tends to get a lot of money and grants, and I don't think we ever highlight that. So in terms of the technology, he recently got a license plate reader for one of the vehicles, and he just got another either 2 or 3 stationary ones for our community. So a very special thank you to him.
Can I just say, piggyback on the public safety and say a special thank you to Trustee Levinson for helping me resolve a public safety problem. And that was really a challenge because we were dealing with PSE&G, and we all know how wonderful a process that is. And that was on the corner of Center Street and Hartford. A light was out, and it was truly dark, and really, really dark. And you know, there's not much illumination from the gas light to begin with. And with his tenacity, we were able to have that pole finally replaced after several months today. And I want to thank you, because without you, I don't think I could have made it happen for the residents there.
Trustee Collin?
Can I talk again?
If you have to.
I guess the one takeaway from just to make sure that the board is on the same page, traffic safety and things that kind of relate to pedestrians and automobiles, etc. They are the highest calls for service, and one of the things that was recommended from the ICMA report was an integrated traffic safety plan to coordinate traffic safety enforcement, education, and engineering. And we have a subcommittee that's been put together that kind of cross-populates between our transportation experts, the traffic bureau from the police department is going to be working with us. We're coordinating with the schools, and we have a couple other experts who have dealt with both complete streets and safe routes to schools. So I'm pretty excited to launch that initiative. And I believe everybody's seen now, it was in the press that the police department got the grant regarding the pedestrian decoys and all that. So that's another step in the right direction, because I think that issue is perhaps the one that we get the most calls about, is traffic safety, speeding, speed humps, roundabouts, pork chops, people drive too fast. So if you have any comments or suggestions regarding that, please feel free to shoot it over to me. That's it, Mr. President.
Thank you. Trustee Clark?
Yeah. The last Public Works and Infrastructure Committee was on August the 15th. It was not as robust as it could have been because the DPW director was on vacation, but we soldiered on. Let's see, we did have a member of the public there, and we did make some progress on the Ludington Brook overflow situation. So I'm also reminding you that there were easement cost issues you need to take to Legal Affairs Committee. And
make sure you shoot it to me.
Yes. And we are going ahead with, Adam gave me an update earlier. One of the steps we took was to, I penned a letter to the individuals in that immediate area to basically remind them of code compliance issues, as that is one of the contributing factors to the overall problem. I think some of you might remember the letter, but it's on its way out. Yeah. Okay. And Trustee Levison, again, is the man, is working on a resolution to Essex County regarding the Wyoming Avenue piece of that whole problem. As far as, I just sort of skipped down to that, to new business, to your point, ICMA report topic, we are lighting the fire trying to get some progress made on the police department needs assessment, basically taking a good look at that building and what we can do to improve it and be a little bit more efficient with the space. One relatively new issue that came up was the Rahway River Greenway finished piece and the maintenance of that area. We're going to have to work out what the budget implications of that are, and a proper maintenance plan for that. And also we discussed the 2014 New Jersey Department of Transportation state aid applications, which was one of the resolutions we addressed earlier this evening. So a little success there. That is essentially it.
Thank you. Trustee Schnall.
Now for the Fun Committee, the Recreation and Cultural Affairs. It was actually, the August meeting was postponed due to vacations, but there was a lot of good information or good activity to report. It was actually a very successful summer for recreation in South Orange. In terms of revenue this year, it was actually a significant improvement upon last year in terms of memberships at the pool, recreation memberships really. Guest passes were up, revenues from swim team and swim classes were up, and actually our swim team was the champion again this year. This is the second year in a row. In fact, because of our success, or the team's success I should say, they're actually being bumped up to the next level for next year. It increasingly gets harder. Summer camps were very successful, and I'm happy to report there was no significant or major problems. The pool did have some issues, but pretty much by far it was a pretty good year. On the cultural affairs side, there is a new exhibition going up starting on September 19th, running for a month or so, actually till October 26th. It's a photography exhibit on jazz stories. It dovetails really nicely with culminating in the October 19th report of the event Giants of Jazz, which is at SOPAC. It was mentioned earlier that on September 22nd is Newcomers Day, and in tandem with that, there's actually a art party in the park. This is the second year we've done this. It's actually by the Tao. And speaking of Tony Smith and the Tao, actually at Seton Hall on September 19th, there's an event sponsored by Seton Hall, but obviously our residents are invited to attend. There will be the South Orange Street Fair on September 29th. And starting September 22nd for 4 weeks is Cinematheque, which is a 4-week film series with actually a moderated discussion. This year, the films are of German origin. And one of the last things is actually the pianos, which was, I think, a very successful thing. The village president mentioned it, and it continues to be a lot of fun. Every time you drive by, there's actually very frequently somebody playing at the piano and sometimes singing. And I'm happy again to report a few weeks into this, the pianos are still working fine. They've been used but not abused.
Now you've done it.
I put the jinx on it. No, this community is taking care.
You never talk about a no-hitter.
It's a good thing. And actually, we have a meeting tomorrow. A couple of residents have reported some concerns at the base of Floods Hill at the park, some nuisance and noise and litter issues, and we're going to try to discuss ways that we can help solve that problem.
I have a quick question for you regarding how many people took advantage of the accommodations we made with Maplewood residents purchasing passes.
It went both directions. Actually, it was very successful. This was primarily, I think, because our school systems are kind of mixed, and a lot of the friends.
Any numbers?
I don't have them up in front of my head. It was somewhere around 45, 50. It was a little bit different, but it did go in both directions, South Orange to Maplewood, Maplewood to South Orange. It was deemed successful. They were happy, and I think
it's wonderful that we could come up with a solution that can make people happy.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
Thank you.
See, was
Okay.
that fun?
That was very fun.
I think you should probably, motion to permanently call it the Fun Committee.
The Fun
Well, you've got to figure out a way to rename the committee into that acronym. So that's your homework for the next time.
I thought finance and IT was where the action was.
So we've got a couple discussion items, and we do have to go back into closed session, so let's try and keep these kind of quick. Trustee Rosner?
This might take more than a few minutes to discuss. So if you want me to put it off the next conference agenda, we can, but it's not something I don't think we're going to be able to have the discussion in 2 minutes, but we can try. The communications, based on an email that I had with you, basically, I don't sense that we have a policy in terms of communications that get how they're distributed to the board or to the public. And in particular, I don't think anything should be posted on the website that reflects a policy without buy-in from the board first, or at least having a discussion with the board first, or having a board have a chance to have input. I'm not talking about a snowstorm emergency where we're communicating that. I'm talking about something that reflects the opinion of the board. And I think that it's something that we need to discuss as a board, how we want those policies put out there, and if we want to put out at all, I guess, but how these statements should be made, and could they be released before we're approved. And I also have a concern with the flow of communications to the public from the board and the administration, and how we get information out there, which is not always in a timely manner or an efficient manner. And it's something that I know that the boards and government everywhere has always struggled with. I've heard this complaint at every level of government, is how do you get information out there? How do you communicate it to the public? And we're at a time now where things with the email addresses, internet, all those things should make it easier or should make it more efficient for us, and yet we don't seem to be taking advantage of it, or we don't seem to figure out how we're going to get to it. And some of these things I thought would be addressed by, that part of it I thought would be addressed by the Public Information and Communications Committee, which I don't know if it's met in all. Marketing Committee, which was one of the issues that we were going to have them. But my primary concern was the communication from this board to the public. So I don't know if anybody else wants to weigh in on how they feel about it.
I agree. I think that the president and the administrator should not be burdened down with having to communicate with us on everything they put out regarding what's happening in the village and how it affects the residents and everything like that. I personally, and I only can speak for myself, have a problem when a statement is made, a policy statement is made that implies that it has the full support of the board or reflects the opinion or the standing of the board. And so I guess it's a discussion on getting on, does the whole board feel that way? And if so, and I'm only concerned about policy, I think it's inappropriate for us to get involved in daily operations and communications and things like that. That's not our role. We're legislators, and our responsibility is to discuss policies, pass resolutions and ordinances, and listen to our residents. But the day-to-day operations and communications about operations and things that residents know, that's not our role or our responsibility. I really have a concern about a policy, especially if it creates a perception that's not true, and I gotta live with the consequences and have no way of communicating clearly. And my problem with, and there's no need to dance around it, was with the communication that was put out about tenure. It was not something reflecting the particular situation that was accurate as far as where I stood in regards to tenure, as a whole. And so I have a real problem with that, I don't like being handcuffed or put in a position that I can't address something in the way that is accurate. And that statement without an approval of a policy and a board was not fair.
Without getting into those specifics, my goal here is to set forth a policy about what can be put on there, or how we should allow it. So my opinion is that anything that reflects the opinion of the board should be required to get the approval of the board first.
At least a majority of the board, because sometimes
Well, yeah, it's always a majority.
not all of us. But at
Approval
least,
of the board is a majority.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
I mean, obviously we can't be approved by minorities, so.
Yeah, I've made a request for the legal committee to place this on the agenda as a discussion item, but it not only includes what we have as a policy statement, but it includes having a focal point within the administration that acts on our behalf for communicating to the community. I mean, is it each one of us now responding to an email request that comes, as an example, that comes to us? Does every one of us respond to it, or do we forward it to a contact person to make that response, which represents all of us? I think that is difficult, either personalizing it as an individual responding versus a board's opinion. And I think we need to discuss that as a policy of how we respond to those types of requests.
I'm okay with the legal committee, bringing it forth, but I would just, to bring it forth with a recommendation to the board.
Oh, no, we would discuss it there, because that's where you do the work. Have a recommendation to the whole board, which the whole board can discuss the recommendation and then come to an agreement.
Okay, so this will be referred to the legal committee to come back to this board with a recommendation.
Yes.
Okay, moving on, pay-to-play ordinance. This is something that we've discussed with Mr. Lewis, Mr. Rother, and I think actually as a board we've discussed this before too. Just a reminder of what this is. We have pay-to-play, anti-pay-to-play ordinances. That category of ordinance basically trying to prevent people who contribute funds to elected officials from getting work from the governing bodies that the elected officials are elected to. We have an ordinance that was rewritten in 2007 that attempted to, I suppose, make things more fair and equitable, and went far beyond the standard that New Jersey has. Unfortunately, it was mostly symbolic, to make a statement about it, and kind of has a whole handful of negative consequences. The biggest one of which is that it really severely slows down some projects, and I know Mr. Lewis can add a little bit about that in a second. But basically, professional service contracts that are awarded by a competitive quoting method, that if you go from a dollar amount and now this project, you have an architect working on a building, you have a planner working on a plan, and they have to do a little bit more, and you say, well, we actually want you to include this as part of your plan. Well, that's going to cost $2,000 more. Well, that goes over the threshold, and now we actually have to bid the entire piece of that project out to anybody. So either you end up with new people who weren't involved in the beginning part of the project, who probably will have to go above that threshold again because they have to somehow catch up on the project and spend the time to do that, or you end up with the same person who was working on it before, but you spent all this money and time bidding it. So it's a bit odd. So what we've talked about is a way to not just make a statement, but actually a practical ordinance that that is a little bit stricter than what the state allows, which basically requires that if someone contributes to a political campaign above the reporting amount, and that person is applying for a contract with that particular governing body, that you conduct it through a fair and open process. In South Orange, what we're basically saying is that, so we're taking that state statute and going further, and we're saying, so if you've donated over $300 to an elected official, and you're the owner of a company or principal of a company, that you can't do any business with the town at all. There's no fair and open process, no bidding, just you're done, there's no, right?
Yeah, but only if we're talking about the professional services or the exempted areas. We're not talking about the public bidding. Bidding.
That's right. But for professional service contracts, which there are, I don't know how many dozens of that we have. So anyway, so maybe, I don't know, Mr. Lewis, if you maybe just want to talk for a second about some of your maybe experiences in some other towns with these types of laws and how they've affected things. But basically the intention is to create a new ordinance that accomplishes the goal of being strict and holding ourselves to a higher kind of ethical standing than the state statute does, but to do so without slowing down some projects, one of which is kind of happening right now.
Right. No, and I think, and this has come up before, and certainly we won't resolve this whole discussion in 2 minutes tonight either, but I think the purpose of putting us on the agenda was to, inform the board, certainly inform the new members who may not have been privy to some of these discussions before, and I think to be followed by, a fairly comprehensive memo that I'll work with Mr. Rother on, as well as some of our the engineers from the other departments, to really kind of identify the issues with the ordinance. I think, while well-intended, and I understand what they were trying to accomplish, I think there were some unintended consequences. Perhaps not being aware of exactly how it sort of ties your hands in certain circumstances. I think I've certainly been through it, discussed it with Mr. Rother, and with the village president. I think we have hopefully come up with sort of an idea and a structure of some changes that we could make and recommend to the board that I think would still certainly honor sort of the spirit of the ordinance and ensuring that there's no political influence on contracts, but sort of take off some of the shackles where literally you're all the way down the road on a certain project, and now all of a sudden you're at a certain number, and you can't just, like any logical person would do, you wouldn't just go back out to bid again. You'd use the person you've been using all along. So, but we think we can do that. Again, I will work with Mr. Rother and get input from the other department heads, and certainly with the village president, to put together a memo that sort of summarizes the history of the experiences that we've had and sort of where those problems have arisen, how we would recommend sort of tweaking the ordinance to address that, what kind of protections we think can stay in the ordinance to help address the concerns, and then we'll present that and I think have that discussion.
I think to keep in mind that the ordinance, when we changed it, was because there were some random firms that were making donations to political candidates, rather large sums actually. And it was like almost, until you connected the dots, you weren't quite sure why these contributions were being made. And then these firms, so you may have the lawyer for the firm, for an engineering firm that was making a donation, and you might not know that the lawyer worked for that engineering firm, and then magically that engineering firm was awarded a bid somehow, and this ordinance, we had to stop that from happening, and that was the real intent of it. Other byproducts that may have caused some harm in it, we felt were worth it in the long run to prevent that from happening again. And obviously there may be a compromise in there, but that's what we have to be careful, because we don't want to go back to those days where people were getting awarded, politicians, elected officials, whatever you want to call, were getting large contributions to their campaign. And there was no connection to it at all.
After you prepare the memo, I'd like to have another full board discussion before we see any type of ordinance.
Exactly.
Well, I
Do you
think
ever know what the-
in order, I mean, in terms of whether you actually see an ordinance, certainly part of the memo will be to spell out where the recommended changes would be. It might be easier to put it in the form of an ordinance, but if you don't want it that way, I'll just do it clause by clause.
But to her point, don't put an ordinance on the
We won't put
agenda.
one
I don't
on
wanna
for
be voting on
introduction
this
by
on
any
first
means. No,
reading
of
at
course
this
not.
meeting.
No,
Okay.
obviously.
But I think part of that is a description of kind of the problems that we've had with the existing ordinance.
Right.
And moving some of these projects forward, because it has caused us a bottleneck.
Can you tell me the ordinance number? So I can do a little homework?
It's a combination,
It's a series, it's been amended twice.
multiple times and still isn't really fully codified, although I think I have the draft codified
I can
version.
send
part of
you-
the
I can send
recodification.
you the whole piece,
Please do.
if you would like that.
Yeah.
I'll email it to you. I'll copy and email it to you.
Thank you.
So that kind of brings us nicely to our next subject, which is we need to schedule 2 special meetings. The first being recodification and water. So I don't know if we want to just do this right now. I think that was that your intention of adding this, is that we just do it right now? Okay.
Then, should we just do the doodle poll? Might be
Yeah, why
easier.
don't you do it, because, do the doodle poll, so we can have time to look at all our calendars and stuff.
I just
Doodle
wanted to
it.
make, because we've been delaying having these meetings, the recodification.
Who's
of it.
we? We've been waiting for them to
Okay,
give
We've
us
been
dates.
waiting for a doodle poll.
Well,
That's all.
let's just do a poll, whatever, because I'm not ready to.
But as far as the recodification project goes, there may be some outside people who we want to invite to come in on certain sections of it. So from the public safety section, we may want to hear from the prosecutor or public defender, and for the building, we may want to have
Can I-
someone from the building department come in and go over certain things that before we make a change, any ordinance or take something off the books, I want to make sure we understand exactly what we're doing.
So
because-
Barry, why don't you just send out some dates
Yeah,
for
we
each
will
one?
take care of soliciting dates from everybody via doodle poll or some
But
other.
I would put
Right.
this into sections, so if we have, if the codification, if we have 8, 10 different sections, I would put them together so we can notify people to come. And we
Yeah,
can
and I
schedule
think
that.
It breaks down into a number of nice sections.
Yeah,
so
I know
that
it
you
does,
can-
but I
you
want
can
us to
schedule
have it
that way.
scheduled by section, so if we're doing building,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
want
Well,
to, and then
and-
we can invite the appropriate person, so.
Right, and obviously in
Just,
advance
it's going
of
to
that.
be a little hard to, I don't know how many sections are there.
Well, it probably breaks down into about 4 different components.
Okay,
that you-
my suggestion would be that we try and do them all in one day, and maybe a weekend day. So that's before we start sending out doodle things, just the amount of time that we expect to spend in each of these. I imagine the recodification
Why
is
don't you
like,
wait to see the outline, the spreadsheet that I'm going to
I think he said 4 hours should be enough.
How much?
4 hours is what
For
he
the
said.
whole thing?
Yeah, I would think so, after you've had the spreadsheet and you can digest
Right.
it.
this group, I don't know.
Yeah, have you met the Board of Trustees?
And I think when we get the spreadsheet, we
4
will
hours per
also,
section?
Per person.
Per person.
when we get the spreadsheet, I will try and, at least to the extent I can, together with.
I suggest we don't invite Sheena and get it done in 2 hours.
Yeah, but we'll also solicit the input of the affected staff in advance and try and get that to you as well.
Okay, so at
And
some
do the
point
same thing with
soon,
East Orange Water,
some
right?
doodle things will get sent out.
Well, the other one, the East Orange Water, is extremely important right now.
But East Orange Water, I don't think we need, I think we can do that in one evening.
Yes.
And that should be in executive session, clearly.
So, so again, do a poll and.
Just send the poll out.
Yeah, and that has urgency to it.
Yes.
That has urgency to it because there is an October 31st deadline that is facing us right now. It's something I was going to talk about in executive session if we got back.
So we need to do that in September,
Yes.
let's say. And we also need to do that too, because with Orange, there's some timing things also that are worth talking about.
What I would also suggest is that, when we look at the village calendar, these kind of are more important than a lot of things we normally have to go to. So if we could even put out the dates where there's like our secondary committees that we're liaisons to, I mean, I'd gladly go to this over that, but just avoid the standing committees. And
Right,
then,
yes, yeah, exactly.
Okay, the last item is Trustee Clark, River Greenway Liaison. I suspect this is you volunteering to do this?
Yes.
No
that is-
objection.
That is me volunteering.
I move.
I thought I could assume that the rest of you came for our next meeting.
All right.
All right.
Done deal.
Walter finally gets to talk to like
That was like the easiest ever.
I guess you never learned about silence is gold.
That whole, you know.
So I don't know, if we actually didn't know how that appointment was made.
I don't know how
Just
the
don't worry.
appointment was initially.
You just go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
If we need to do so, if we
I think
figure
basically
out
what happened was
we have to do
Janine
something
Bauer
else,
just-
we'll put a resolution on the next
Trustee
meeting.
Bauer appointed herself.
Yeah, I think
initially.
Trustee Bauer did it
Okay.
de facto.
Yeah.
And,
So she's appointed
so there
you.
was never.
I think the tradition is there that the head of the Public Works Department committee is the one who does it.
Right. Okay. That sounds good.
All yours.
It's now the tradition.
All right, so we're gonna go into executive session again after this, but we can adjourn our conference agenda.
I move.
Move to adjourn. Second. All those in favor?
Motion to adjourn conference agenda.